Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth held on Monday, December 16th, 2019. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg and I'll call this meeting to order. I ask the Deputy Clerk to note our starting time for the minutes as 7 p.m. I invite you at this time to rise for the playing of O Canada. Well, it's nice to have a big audience. Thank you for coming tonight. Today's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded, and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. These days, it's also about the chair trying to figure out which buttons to push, just so that you know. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances when deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their comments result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. Thank you. Now, this community succeeds and flourishes when its people make their contributions. Those making important contributions include councillors at this table who will listen to and deliberate on the matters on our proposed agenda. This council has been well supported by dedicated members of the staff of North Perth who provide service and reports to this council and to our community, and those who have business with or interest in the work of this council. I appreciate all of you being here tonight and your service. I invite your decorum over the course of the coming meeting. Since our work does require concentration, procedures issued by council requires all but councillors and specific media to turn off electronic communication devices at this time, and even then to respect focused use for our meeting. Use of cameras or audio devices during or to record this meeting is not permitted. Let us move then to item 2.1 on our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with pecuniary interest, including those who have declared in writing already, to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing in due course. Councillors, any declarations to be made? Councillor Barnes.
I would declare a conflict on 5.4.1. The account, specifically the North Perth Spinrite Child and Family Centre, as I have grandchildren that attend, and subsequent to that, the confirmatory bylaw 13.1.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. And Deputy Mayor Kellum.
Yes, through you, Mayor Kasenberg, I would also like to declare a pecuniary interest on items 5.4.1 as well 13.1. The confirmatory bylaw is my mother and father are tenants at Perth Metals.
Great, thank you. Councillors, anyone else have a known interest at this point? All right. Oh, yes. So we have a special opportunity tonight to express recognition to a couple who have performed great service over a long period of time for this municipality and its predecessors. And so at this time, I'd like to come forward. I will step forward into the circle. Maybe I'll also change the inputs here so people can see what's going on. There we go. So it is my pleasure tonight to recognize the long and unbelievably dedicated service of Vince and Jackie Smith, who have served incredibly admirably. In fact, they're sort of a local treasure with regards to animal control in our community, in particular dog control and dog provision of pound services for dogs that have been retained as a consequence of being on the loose or otherwise. They have, as I said, 40 years of dedicated service. This is impossible to replace. I know they were involved with both Wallace Township and with Elma Township prior to the amalgamation and have been with us faithfully for 20 years in North Perth. So it is my pleasure to acknowledge their long service and their well-deserved retirement, I suppose, is one way of looking at this, and let them know that their council, their community greatly appreciates all the work, the countless hours, the on-call 24/7, the coming out in the middle of the night to assist with dogs who need to be managed, and supporting both this council and municipality and the Ontario Provincial Police and their mandate, and probably other police forces before that, in fact. We are just incredibly grateful and are glad to be able to recognize them publicly at this meeting of council, the last at which they will have these responsibilities. So again, Vince and Jackie Smith, we're very grateful for your service. Invite you to come forward if you are here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Come, there's going to be a picture here, I believe. Doug, did you want to join us? Let me invite the Deputy Mayor to join us as well. Thank you. And we have a small gift in the spirit of one, the appreciation for your efforts, and two, the season. We bring a small gift thanking you for your service again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, would you like to come and express your appreciation to the Smiths? Yeah, the councillors are going to sneak by here. They're going to come in.
Oh,
Thank you for your participation.
thank you very much.
Oh, they want to say something. You're more than welcome to say something. Here.
Testing. Okay, you have to be prepared at every length of the way. So it's only one page, and I'll keep it short because I see there's quite an agenda. Anyway, we do have a couple of
things to say. First of all, let me tell you that working for our local municipalities as canine control has been part of our life since 1980. We started first with Elma, and then as amalgamations took place, our job grew to encompass all of North Perth and parts of Huron East. At the height of our canine control career, we were looking after 7 different wards. In many ways, the job has defined who we are, and we have refined what it was as we attempted the job with honesty, integrity, and accountability. It was with mixed emotions that we decided we no longer wanted to renew our contract. And it was one of those jobs that, although not everybody was always happy to see us, we met many of the residents of North Perth, and we're happy to say there are a lot of great people in this community. We always felt that with this job that we were always where we were supposed to be. Sometimes it was rescuing a lost pet, sometimes reuniting it with their owner. Sometimes it was assisting the police with their efforts, and sometimes our presence didn't even include animals. With our door-to-door canvas, we would find ourselves helping residents that didn't even have a pet. We've enjoyed our work with the municipalities. Doing this job, there had its trials and challenges, but together with the direction of the people that we work with, we always attempted to provide efficient, quality service, meeting the job with the mission and values of the municipality of North Perth. The staff has been great to work with. We've valued that strong working relationship with the municipality. Besides publicly thanking our family for all their support over the years, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the staff and councils that we've worked with over the years, as well as many of the cooperative residents of North Perth. It truly is a great place to work, play, and live. Thank you.
A little bit of an adjustment in the audience. So that brings us to agenda item 2.2 on our agenda, which allows us to prepare ourselves for the meeting in the order that has been prescribed. I have a resolution before me that reads as follows, that the agenda for tonight's meeting, do we have an amendment, Pat? I don't think so. The agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I invite a mover for this? Councillor Johnston, seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns at this point? All right, let me switch the source here. Give me a second. Bring that up. Let's have the vote on this. Thank you. All right, so Councillor Richardson makes it unanimous. That is carried. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 3, with the so-called consent agenda. These items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they require council's approval. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, or individual action may do so. There are 6 items on our consent agenda tonight, including the minutes of the last regular council meeting. Councillors, do any of you have a desire to extract any of these items for discussion, update, or action? See no hands raised. I have a proposed resolution for consideration. The consent items 3.1 to 3.6 be received for information, and the minutes of the December 9th, 2019 regular council meeting be adopted. Can I invite a mover? Councillor Duncan, and seconded by Councillor Anstead. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that matter? Let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you. At this time, it's proposed that we move to agenda item 4. We do have a busy night, so I'm letting everyone know that item 4 is going to take some time to get through. We have included on tonight's agenda 3 public meetings to consider land planning matters. To facilitate the public meetings, 2 of which are exclusively for the benefit of county councillors at this table, we must temporarily adjourn from our regular council meeting. I have before me a motion to make that happen that reads as follows. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth adjourns at 7:16 p.m. for the purpose of public meetings under the Planning Act concerning the following. An application for a plan of subdivision by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Dalmich Holdings Limited. An application for an amendment to the County of Perth official plan by Stephen and Sharon Gerber, and an application for site plan approval by 245-9825 Ontario, Inc. Can I invite a mover for this? Councillor Seiler and Councillor Rothwell as our seconder. Pardon me. Any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried, which means we stand temporarily adjourned. That brings us to our 3 public meetings. As I said, the first 2 actually are associated with county business, and therefore it is noted that the 3 county councillors, myself, Deputy Mayor Callum, and Councillor Duncan, are the ones who primarily are challenged to execute this meeting. The other councillors, of course, are invited to pay attention to what goes on, of course, because there are matters further about this later in our meeting, but are not expected to speak. So the first, this is a public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act for the approval of a draft plan of subdivision. I welcome all those who have come for the purposes of this meeting. This is a statutory public meeting pursuant to the Ontario Planning Act to deal with an application for a draft plan of subdivision submitted by Dalmich Holdings Limited as owners of the subject property. Correspondence, reports, and comments received regarding this application will be considered by Council. Those in attendance wishing to make comment concerning this application will be given an opportunity to do so. Anyone wishing to appeal either the Perth County, this council, or the Perth County Council's decision must make verbal submission during this public meeting or have made a written submission to either or the organizations. Thank you. Those who want to receive notice of the municipality's decision concerning this application are asked to sign the sheet pertinent to this that is on the table at the back of the meeting hall, giving their mailing address and telephone number. At this time, I'll call on County of Perth planner David Gundrum to provide us with a summary of this application and requested amendment. David, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of County Council, the following application for a draft plan of subdivision proposes to develop the subject lands having an area of approximately 14.4 hectares or 35.6 acres found within the serviced urban area of Atwood in 4 stages, possessing a total range of 193 to 214 dwelling units. The total range of units is proposed to be made up of 67 townhouse dwelling units, 15 multi-residential units, and a range of 111 to 132 single detached dwelling units proposed to be developed over 4 stages of development. 6 new streets are proposed, including an extension of existing Ellen Street located within Atwood. All street names would, of course, be subject to the satisfaction of a confirmation by the Municipality of North Perth, as per draft plan condition number 9 included in our report. The subject lands are located adjacent to the existing built-up area of Atwood and currently contain no buildings or structures. Surrounding land uses include an existing steel welding manufacturing business located to the north, a multi-use trail located to the east, and natural environment and agricultural lands located beyond that. To the west and south of the subject lands is the existing built-up area of Atwood, which primarily contains low-density development in the form of single detached dwellings. An application for zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted concurrently with the draft plan of subdivision application, which would place the subject lands into appropriate zones to permit the intended forms of development. Decisions concerning applications for draft plans of subdivision are required to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, or PPS. The subject lands are found entirely within a designated settlement as per the PPS. Section 1132 of the PPS states that land use patterns within settlement areas shall be based on densities and a mix of land uses that make efficient use of planned or available infrastructure and services. The proposed draft plan would utilize the network of existing municipal services such as public roads, water, and sanitary systems found within the settlement area, while promoting a mix of densities through development of single detached townhouse and multi-residential units. According to Section 1.4.1b of the PPS, municipalities are required to provide a minimum 3-year supply of residential units available through lands which are suitably zoned for residential development. At present, the municipality of North Perth is meeting this target. However, the supply of lands suitably zoned for residential development are predominantly located within the Listowel ward. In the year 2018, being the most recent year for which annual new building data is available, approximately 90% of all new dwellings were created within the Listowel ward, with the remaining 10% created in all other geographic areas of the municipality. Given these overlying statistics, the proposed development would certainly result in an increase in the proportionate supply of residential units for areas which exist outside of the Listowel ward and lead to a more balanced spatial distribution of new housing units throughout the municipality. Based on our review, the Planning Office has found that the proposed plan of subdivision is consistent with the PPS and also conforms to the County of Perth official plan, particularly that it has sufficient regard for the criteria contained under Section 16.2.2 of the County of Perth official plan, which deals with proposals that concern the division of land through the subdivision process. The County Planning Office is recommending that Municipality of North Perth Council recommend to County Council that the application for plan of subdivision, file NP-03 submitted by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Delmitch Holdings Limited, be approved, and that County Council approve this application subject to the 19 conditions that are contained in our report. Pending recommendation of North Perth Council and the results of tonight's public meeting, the proposed draft plan of subdivision would be considered for adoption at a future meeting of full County Council. And for the public record, I'd like to present the comments that have been received to date, beginning with our agency comments and progressing to the written comments received from members of the public. So beginning on, and some of these comments from our agencies predate our circulation and relate to pre-circulation of the application prior to the legislated circulation. So on January 9th, 2019, we received comment from Municipality of North Perth Fire Department stating that due to the fact that there's no municipal water supply available for firefighting, to satisfy firefighting needs in the proposed subdivision, that North Perth Fire Department would require that a water supply in the subdivision be available of a volume of 30,000 imperial gallons for firefighting purposes, and that this supply must be available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with the necessary connections for fire department hookups. Subsequently, on January 21st, 2019, we received comment from the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. Maitland Valley Conservation Authority reviewed the proposed draft plan with respect to natural hazards. Maitland Valley Conservation Authority cited that they have no objection to approval of the proposed draft plan of subdivision file 18-03, and that the application is in conformance with Section 3.1 natural hazard policies of the PPS. Subsequently, during our public circulation, we received response from the Huron-Perth Catholic District School Board, citing that they have no concerns with the application. And we received comment on December 3rd, our last agency comment from Hydro One Networks, citing that they had no concern with the application for plan of subdivision. That's the balance of the written agency comments that our office received. And I'll just move on to written comments that we received from members of the public during our circulation period. So beginning on December 3rd, 2019, we received comments from Jim and Donna Antignap of 90 Baker Street. Jim and Donna have written to the county with the following comments regarding the application. Comment 1, has the subdivision plan provided for adjacent landowners to be incorporated into the drainage plan of the proposed subdivision? Comment 2, is the current sewage line and pumping station adequate to handle such a large increase in volume? If upgrades were to be required, are the current development charges sufficient to cover the costs, and doing so without placing additional sewage charges on the current users? Comment 3 from Jim and Donna is, does the municipal's master growth plan indicate the need for creating these dwellings and justifying using prime agricultural land, which the property is currently being used for? And the balance of their comments stated, when the proposed land was originally designated as a proposed subdivision, the current sewer system was not in place, and if the property had been developed at that time, lot sizes would have been much larger to accommodate septic systems, resulting in a much lower population density. We have concerns that such a large increase in the current population will cause major traffic concerns within the town. And that's the balance of the written comment we received on December 5th from Mr. and Mrs. Antignap. Our second and last written comment we received from members of the public comes to us from Wanda and Jeremy Highbine, of property owners of adjacent property located at 145 Main Street in Atwood. To whom it may concern, I am writing as a concerned neighbour about the proposed application for a plan of subdivision in Atwood, Ontario. Our property is located at 145 Main Street, Atwood, and borders on this subdivision on two sides of our property, and we are therefore significantly impacted by this application and future plans. Due to the close proximity of our property to block number 2 and block number 20 on the draft plan of subdivision, we have the following concerns with the application. Concern number 1, block 20. This is proposed to be a public walkway to connect the subdivision for foot traffic to Highway 23. The walkway is proposed to go along the entire north side of our property in close proximity to our house. Our main concern with this proposed walkway is the loss of privacy to our property. This is a quiet residential neighborhood, and having a public walkway along our entire lot would mean that we would lose all privacy on our front yard, north side of house, and backyard, as well as all of this would be visible from the trail and walkway. It is safe to assume that having the walkway along our entire property would increase the chance of trespassing on our property for those that venture off the trail. Noise pollution is a concern, as the proposed walkway goes right beside the north side of our house where all of our bedrooms are located, as this is a family home. Property value, while the community may have an overall increase in market value due to this new development, we feel that this much loss of privacy that our property will have a localized decrease in value. The proposed application does not identify if privacy fencing and or green fencing is included in the plans. It is not felt that the existing landowners should be responsible for this major cost, as we did not request or support the planning change. Until the issues about privacy are addressed, we are unsupportive of this walkway. Another major concern is that we do not view the public walkway as a benefit to the proposed subdivision. There are no essential services, stores, or public parks on the north side of town, and therefore a walkway to this area is not seen as adding any value to the subdivision. The community center parks, public pool, and downtown stores can still be accessed by foot using the sidewalks on the back street, Ellen Street, as the main pedestrian access. For these reasons, we feel that the public walkway should be removed from this application, and if it is not, that our privacy concerns are appropriately addressed before any approval is granted. With regard to Block 15, Mr. and Mrs. Highbine have written that this is proposed as a multiple residential lot, that this lot has been used and maintained for many years by ourselves and was previously part of our property before the previous owner completed the severance as it appears today. While we have always assumed that this lot would be developed and we would welcome a new neighbor in the Atwood community, we were more than surprised at the plan for a multiple residential zoning on this application. Approval of the proposed plan of subdivision would allow many different types of construction on this lot, and there is no clear indication of what is being planned, making it difficult for the neighboring property owners directly impacted to this construction to respond adequately. I've talked to the neighbors on the north side of Block 15, and they expressed similar concerns as follows. Light pollution. A multi-residential property would have more parking lot spaces, which normally have yard lights, and more light pollution than a single-family dwelling. Sound pollution. Multi-residential property would have more noise, as there are more residents living in a condensed area and potentially more young families with townhouses. Property value. Being situated by a multi-residential unit complex, such as townhouses or small apartment building, would have a localized negative impact on the surrounding property values. Privacy. My understanding is that a housing unit may be built at 90 degrees to the existing homes on Main Street. This would mean that residents in the multi-residential front yards would be facing the side yards of the existing houses, which would result in less privacy. Curb appeal. Main Street Atwood typically is home to single-family dwellings only, and this helps the overall curb appeal to stay consistent. Other issues that may arise from a construction project of this size may include loss of full-grown trees on neighboring lots, drainage issues, etc. Access to Block 15. Based on my previous conversations with planners, I understand that a driveway to a multi-residential unit would likely back onto Ellen Street through Block 3, as there are limitations for new driveways onto the provincial highway. There is no evidence of this in the proposed plans. For these reasons, I would like to propose that Delmitch Holdings Limited and the county planners reconsider changing Block 15 from multi-residential to residential single-family dwelling. I feel that our concerns need to be addressed and changes made before this application for plan of subdivision should be approved. We feel that Atwood is a fantastic community, and we deeply care about how this subdivision will impact our property. Thank you for allowing us to provide feedback and public input. Sincerely, Wanda and Jeremy Highbine, property owners at 145 Main Street, Atwood. That's the balance of the public comments we received from members of the public. So just to reiterate, staff are recommending that this application, that Municipality of North Perth recommend to County Council that this application be approved, and as noted, this would be consideration for adoption of the draft plan of subdivision would be dealt with at a future meeting of full County Council.
Thank you, David. Could you provide us with a summary of notice of public meeting details?
My apologies. I will say that I thought I had a copy of the public notice with me, but apparently I'm lacking it. But public notice was provided as per the requirements of the Planning Act, and circulation was provided to all property owners within the legislated circulation area, as well as posting to the County of Perth website as per Planning Act requirements.
Okay. So, Pat, do you have any further information on this?
The notice was dated November 26, 2019.
That is correct. Yeah.
Pat, to your rescue. All right. Any further correspondence, comments, or reports received that we haven't heard about already?
None received.
All right. So at this time, we open to the members of the public who are in attendance for this meeting. First, we invite those who are in support of the application, other than the applicant, to approach the podium and to introduce themselves. Tell us where you live, and you may have your say. Anyone wishing to take advantage of the support of this application? Okay, seeing none for that.
Jim Knapp, I live at 90 Baker Street, Atwood, and I think the Planning Act requires that you have sufficient screening between existing properties and any new subdivision. And not having privy to seeing the official plan, I just wondered, asking the planning department if there is a buffer zone in between existing houses and what the subdivision will be, either trees or fences or whatever.
Okay.
Or at what stage you can request that if you so desire.
Right. I think that's the important question here. Shall I invite a response to this at this point? David, why don't you, if you have anything to say on that matter, that would be helpful.
So to answer the community member's question regarding privacy and screening, so draft plan of subdivision is proposing development of various forms of residential units, single detached, multi-residential and townhomes. In the case of, to address the consideration for privacy and screening, all development would be subject to the provisions of the local zoning bylaw, which would dictate minimum setbacks from lot lines, such that the development pattern, especially in the case of single detached dwellings, would be mirrored and very similar to what's pre-existing in Atwood. I mean, property owners would be within their development rights to erect fences, provided they're of up to a maximum height under the local zoning bylaw. For cases where development is for more than 2 units on a single lot, the North Perth site plan control bylaw would kick in, which also has additional provisions to address privacy and screening for where more than 2 units are proposed to be developed on a single lot. So I hope that helps answer the question.
And we would see more of this with regards to the site plan, right?
Correct. That's correct, yeah.
So at a later stage, there's the site plan agreement, which comes before council, should this application be approved. And at that stage, we'll see a lot more of those details. So we'll know then what the intent is. So any further who are in opposition to this application may come forward and speak. Please share with us your name and your address.
I'm Linda Stevenson, and we're, I guess, directly across from it. Is there a way we can get a copy of the report? I, for some reason, didn't get any of my notices. All I got was a notice of this meeting, and it sounds like everybody's been able to see quite a bit more than we did. So I'm really not sure what's going on, so I apologize for my stupid remarks now. We have a barn with animals and with that many houses next door. That obviously is an issue. There's a barn right behind with a lot of animals too. I'm not sure where the water's going to go because the ditch there right now really isn't adequate. Like, we get a fair bit of overflow every spring. Not sure what they're planning to do with the dirt and the noise and during the construction. Like when they tore up our street, it was they were bringing big front-end loaders to get us in and out of our house, so I have no idea what's going to happen now. No idea what the value of the buildings are going to be. Like, unfortunately, it's a fact of life. If there's a lot of low-income housing, there's a lot of good people in low-income housing, but, you know, sometimes crime and other stuff comes along with those areas. The police are quite a piece away, as well as the value of buildings can be affected if you have a single family dwelling next to high rises or low rises or whatever they are. Again, I haven't seen the report other than what was going through the screen there, and I really couldn't read it that far away, sorry. The privacy issue, other people have already addressed that. It kind of looks like it's going to be straight across from us within a few feet. People walking by all the time, dogs, whatever, loose, which I don't think we have anybody to control the dogs now. I don't know. Yeah, I have lots of concerns because I don't even know what it is. I don't know where our notices went. We should have got 2 notices, mine and my husband, and I just got a letter in the mail saying this was basically to come into this one. So, sorry,
Okay.
I'm out of touch.
Thank you. Does staff at any level want to respond to any of that at this point in time? I think the concern about notice is of some interest here.
As was mentioned before, notice was given as per the requirements of the Planning Act. There was a sign posted on the subject property 20 days prior to today. Copy of the notice would have been mailed out to all of the property owners within 120 meters of the boundaries of the subject property. We had no mailed notices that were returned to our office, so we put our faith in Canada Post that they did their job and got everything to where it needed to go. With regard to some comments about affordability, as mentioned previously, the development does propose a range of residential dwelling types, including multi-residential. So while we don't have any definition of affordability in the county official plan, there's certainly, through the range of dwelling types built, implied in the development that there would be a range of affordability implied through the development. So yeah. And as far as drainage, we had a GM Blue Plan Engineering provided a fully scoped functional servicing report as well as stormwater management study, which deemed that local municipal services are adequate to service the development, both for water supply, sewage disposal, and stormwater management.
Okay, thank you. Anyone further wish to speak in opposition to this application? Okay, then finally in this section of the meeting, we invite the applicant or the applicant's agent to approach and to speak to this application. Yes, I will do that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Pierre Chauvin from...
Good evening,
welcome. Introduce yourself.
Your Worship, members of council, members of the public, staff. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm a partner at MHBC Planning out of Kitchener. Thank you. Thanks, Pat. With me this evening are Scott Dahlner and Les Turvitt, who are with Dalmich Holdings, John Kerr with GM Blue Plan, Evan Sugden with my office as well. So I guess before you this evening is the culmination of a decision that was made many years ago by your own council to extend the sanitary sewer to Atwood. And the result of that product of extending the sanitary sewer was facilitating the redevelopment of these lands to more density than what was previously approved back in 1995 for a lower density type of subdivision. So I think that was, the foresight of your council back in the early 2000s to extend the sewers to service and resolve sanitary issues in Atwood has also resulted in the ability to provide more development within this community. So I'm hoping that with this presentation I can give a bit more background and answer some of the questions that you've heard. And I'll try not to belabor some of the things that Mr. Gundrum has already addressed. The site is, as you know, located in the northeast end of Atwood, close to the intersections of Highway 23 or Main Street and Monument Road. It's bounded. It's not far from Listowel, and as well as the city of Waterloo. We believe that this will contribute to the overall population of not only North Perth, but particularly Atwood and specifically. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a resubmission of a previous draft plan of subdivision that was approved in the early or mid 1990s, but far be it for a lot less units because those are based on privately serviced lots. Oops, I'll try to be sensitive here. These lands are within the serviced area of Atwood, so they're not prime agricultural lands. They may be farmed currently, but they are within the settlement area, which is designated for this use. The surrounding uses within Atwood, as you know, are predominantly low residential uses. There are some rural uses on the outskirts of Atwood. And there is some forest cover. There is a small forested area on our property, and I'll speak to that momentarily, but predominantly rural residential uses further to the east and north of the property. As I noted earlier, we're not far from Main Street, and it provides access to this particular property to not only Listowel, but to the central commercial area within Atwood. I've drawn on this air photo, a 500-meter radius from the limits of the subdivision, which is on average about a 5-minute walk. So you can see that within 5 minutes of the subdivision, you can get to, I'll call it downtown Atwood. Oops. Again, designated for the use, designated residential. This is and for a serviced urban area. This is where growth is intended to be directed. The county plan does provide for certain densities, targets for this use. I would say we comply with the various densities for the various uses. We range in 15 to 18 units per hectare for singles, 46 units per hectare for the towns, and over 60 units per hectare for the multiple residential use that we're proposing on the property. So again, as David mentioned, this proposal is for 193 to 214 units. That range is predominantly based on the range of single units that we're proposing. This is proposed to be a lotless block subdivision, so final lotting will occur prior to registration, and it will conform to your zoning that's being proposed. The range is based on the singles, is based on 50 to 60 foot single detached lot widths. There are approximately 67 street fronting towns, as well as a small multiple residential block fronting Main Street that has about 14 to 18 multiple residential units. This plan also includes pedestrian walkways, a neighborhood park that's accessible to all parts of the subdivision, a future development block which will provide future access to neighboring lands for future development, and appropriate services, a stormwater management pond, as well as accommodates the Hood Municipal Drain, which skirts the subject property. I have a subsequent figure showing all these various items, and a overall density of 13 to 14, or I'll say 15 units per hectare. This is just a schematic of the plan of subdivision in the context of the surrounding area. We'll note it's a very similar, if you recall, if some of you were around in 95 when you've seen the old Fisher subdivision, very similar road pattern where Ellen Street was extended, sort of a modified grid throughout. We've got our swim pond, our stormwater management pond, with an outlet across to Monument Road into the Hood Drain, which as part of our stormwater management, we will be upgrading and improving the Hood Drain. So this will be an overall benefit, we believe, to the community in improving the drainage situation for not only for this subdivision, but for everybody else. We are also accommodating part of the Hood Drain along the I'll call it the east and northern perimeter of the property, and that will accommodate that drainage upstream. I noted a future development block which provides the potential for future access to the future development of other lands that are within the service settlement area of Atwood. A park block, which is, again, there's that 5-minute walking radius outlined in purple, this radius here, all within the entire subdivision is within 5-minute walk of that central park. It doesn't represent the full 5%. I note there is a draft approval condition that requires cash in lieu for the balance of that 5%. The light yellow represents the single detached areas of the subdivision. I'll call it the pink areas are the street fronting townhouses, and the orange up along Main Street is the proposed multiple residential block. There are policies in the county official plan that direct these types of blocks on arterial or collector roads. This is why we've located it here on Main Street. And the walkway was something that the municipality and the county felt was important to provide that pedestrian connectivity through the subdivision. And we would tend to agree that is essential not only for the residents of this subdivision, but for future resident or existing residents in the community to ultimately connect to the community trail, the rail trail, which basically wraps around the eastern perimeter of the subdivision. There is a proposed pedestrian connection in this location and a crossing of that municipal drain, which will provide access to that municipal trail. So excellent, not only connectivity with the existing road fabric for vehicular traffic, but also lots of opportunity for pedestrian connections within and throughout the community. The zoning is currently zoned future development. I mentioned the former subdivision here. You can see the actually dash pattern of that road pattern that was approved on the zoning schedule. The entire property is actually zoned future development. As Mr. Gundrum noted, we have a concurrent zone change application filed with the municipality, so I'll likely be before you again when that application comes forward. But predominantly, it's proposed to be zoned. Well, I'll go to that schedule. All of the yellow areas are proposed to be zoned resident R4, similar to the predominant zoning of the Atwood settlement area. The townhouses will be zoned R5. That's the zoning category that allows that use. Similarly, the multiple residential block is proposed to be zoned R5, and all the other public or park spaces will be parks. We are proposing a holding zone on portions of the plan. This is a requirement to ensure that services are available prior to registration and that securities are in place. So we believe, as part of our application, we did submit a planning justification report, a functional servicing report that was prepared by GM Blue Plan, and concluded that the property is serviceable. As I mentioned, it also had a preliminary stormwater management brief, which aligned the requirements for stormwater management control and the upgrades to the hood drain, as I mentioned. There was also a traffic impact study completed as part of this application. And as Mr. Gundrum noted, as part of the circulation comments, we received comments from the fire department with respect to the water storage issue. This is an existing condition within Atwood, and as part of the resolution, we have agreed to install an underground storage tank within the park that's proposed in stage 1 of the subdivision, and that's something that will be cost shared between the municipality and ourselves because it is an existing condition that we are helping to facilitate. So those are the studies that have been prepared, and just in summary, we believe this application is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms with the criteria of the Planning Act and is generally conforms with the County of Perth official plan. This is an area that's identified for growth. It is certainly strategically located, and in terms of existing municipal infrastructure, this plan of subdivision will provide the multiple means of connectivity and is a logical extension of your existing settlement area in Atwood. And we believe this represents a good planning and makes absolute sense from a land use perspective. We are here in support of the staff recommendation. I would say that there is one condition that we would ask that will county staff consider revising, and we will hope to work with them on that. And that is condition 11 with respect to the phasing. I think the way it's worded now, it binds us to 4 phases. Our concern is that given the market, we would appreciate some flexibility in that phasing, and it may be that ideally we like to register as much as possible quickly, but if market demand is not there, then we may need to adjust those phasing limits so that perhaps a smaller scale of development is proposed at a certain point in time, so that we're not biting off more than we can chew. And so if the condition, I would suggest, were worded that it was the phasing was generally in accordance with the draft plan, and adjustments to the phasing may be approved subject to the approval of the satisfaction of the county and the municipality of North Perth. So those are my submissions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chauvin. County councillors, do you have any further questions about this application that you'd like to pursue? Councillor Duncan? Okay, Deputy Mayor's good too. I don't have any significant questions either at this time. So that leads us to the sort of wrapping up this part of the public meeting. Following this public meeting, North Perth Council will consider a recommendation concerning the official plan amendment, which will be sent to the Perth County Council. Perth County Council decision will be subject to appeal to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, or LPAT, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. That brings to close this public meeting. At this time, we just closed the meeting, so. Okay, next we have another public meeting. This public meeting is called pursuant to the Planning Act for the approval of a, I think I have these scrambled, let me get there. Okay, this is for the proposed amendment to the County of Perth official plan. There we go. The clerk is giving me the nod. Thank you for coming, those of you who are here. The purpose of this meeting, this is a statutory public meeting pursuant to the Ontario Planning Act to deal with an application for an amendment to the County of Perth official plan submitted by Stephen and Sharon Gerber as owners of the subject property. Correspondence, reports, and comments received regarding this application will be considered by Council. Those in attendance wishing to make comment concerning this application will be given an opportunity to do so. Anyone wishing to appeal the Perth County Council decision must make verbal submission during this public meeting or have made a written submission to Perth County. Those who want to receive notice of the municipality's decision concerning this application are asked to sign a sheet which is available on the table at the back of this room, giving their mailing address and telephone number. At this time, I'll call on County Planner David Gundrum to present information pertinent to this application for an amendment. David, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Just give me a moment here. Mayor, members of council, the applicants on behalf of the owners are seeking an official plan amendment to the County of an amendment to the County of Perth official plan for the purpose of creating a special policy area to allow for the establishment of new open space, recreational uses, and stormwater management facilities on subject lands having an area of approximately 2.63 hectares or 6.5 acres within the agriculture designation of the County of Perth official plan. The subject lands currently contain farmland under cultivation and are proposed to remain within the agriculture designation of the county official plan should the proposed amendment be approved. The official plan amendment proposes that these new uses are to be accessory to an existing institutional use, being a private school which is located within the hamlet of Donegal, located with municipal address of 7021 Perth Road 147. The official plan amendment is also proposing to allow for future severance of the subject lands for the purpose of enlarging the abutting lot containing the existing institutional use which is located within the hamlet of Donegal as previously described. If the official plan amendment were to be approved by County Council, related applications for consent would be forwarded to the County of Perth Land Division Committee and zoning bylaw amendment to the municipality of North Perth. The primary effect of the proposed amendment would be to allow for future severance of the subject lands within the agriculture designation and to allow for the permitted uses of new open space, recreational use, and stormwater management facilities on the subject lands, with said uses being accessory to the existing institutional use located within the hamlet of Donegal. Referring to our review, Section 2.3.1 of the Provincial Policy Statement states that prime agricultural areas shall be protected for long-term use for agriculture, while Section 2331 of the PPS states that permitted uses and activities in these areas shall include agricultural uses, agriculture-related uses, and on-farm diversified uses. Permitting the proposed uses within the agriculture designation of the county official plan, in our interpretation, is at odds with the protections afforded these lands under the provincial policy statement, should they remain within the existing policy designation subject to the proposed special policy area. Approval of the amendment to the County of Perth official plan would effectively remove the subject lands from long-term agricultural use and therefore be inconsistent with the provincial policy statement. The subject lands constitute an area currently under cultivation for crop production. As per section 2.3.6.1 B of the PPS, this section of the PPS contains 4 tests for the permission of non-agricultural uses in prime agricultural areas and provides 4 tests that need to be met or demonstrated to be met in order to permit such uses. To address these tests, the lands subject to the proposed changes for the official plan amendment do not constitute a specialty crop area. Further to this section, the applicants have identified a demonstrated need for the proposed expansion of the accessory facilities to the existing school based on current and projected student enrollment. The applicants have also evaluated the practicality of alternative locations given the catchment area of the existing school and neighboring schools within the private school network as per Schedule F of our report. No reasonable alternative locations in prime agricultural areas with lower priority agricultural lands or lands existing outside of prime agricultural areas have been able to be identified as candidate sites for the proposed uses. With further regard to the tests contained under Section 2361B of the PPS, it is not entirely clear that there is in fact an identified need within the planning horizon for additional land to be designated to accommodate the proposed use in this case. One of the tests, the last test that I'm going to refer to under this section, states that the proposed use must comply with the MDS formula of the MDS document. In regard to the MDS, correspondence that we received from OMAFRA on July 10th, 2019, cited as Schedule C in our report, confirmed that the proposed uses constitute a Type B land use as per Guideline 34 of the MDS document. It should be noted that a total of 6 existing livestock facilities have been identified in the vicinity of the subject lands. MDS analysis provided by the applicants has determined that livestock facilities located at 5217 Perth Line 72 and 5167 Perth Line 72, which are already impacted by the existing Donegal settlement boundary, would be further impacted should OPA 183 be approved. While the applicants have proposed a landscape buffer along the eastern and southern boundaries of the proposed special policy area, it is our interpretation that these measures would have no effect on the potential MDS impacts noted for neighboring livestock facilities should the amendment be approved. Guideline number 43 of the MDS document states that MDS 1 setbacks should not be reduced except in limited site-specific circumstances that meet the intent of the MDS document. Examples of these circumstances include mitigation for environmental or public health and safety impacts or to avoid natural or man-made hazards. It is our interpretation that variance to MDS for the existing livestock facilities that would need to occur should the amendment be approved cannot qualify as exemptions exemptions that are provided for under this guideline in the MDS document. The MDS impacts upon neighboring livestock facilities that would occur demonstrate that the uses proposed by OPA 183 do not comply with the MDS formula as per the requirement of this section of the PPS. We are recommending that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth recommend to County Council that this application be denied, as we have found it to be inconsistent with the provincial policy statement as per sections 231, 2331, and 2361B of the PPS. However, should the Council of the Municipality of North Perth recommend to County Council that the application for amendment to the County of Perth official plan be approved, we have provided draft amendment text as per the attached Schedule H to the report. And And I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have on the matter.
So in terms of our process, next I'd like to have information about the notice of public meeting details.
Notice of public meeting for this application was provided as per the requirements of the Ontario Planning Act. Notice was circulated 20 days prior to the public meeting to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, as well as physical posting of sign on the property, as well as posting to the County of Perth website.
Thank you. Next up, any information pertaining to correspondence, comments, or reports received to this date?
Our office did not receive any correspondence with regard to this application.
Okay. And no reports from relevant agencies worth our attention at this point?
No, none for this application.
Okay. So thank you, David. At this time, then, those who are present in attendance and who are in support of this application other than the applicant may approach. Again, same engagement rules. We'd like your name and your address. Anyone wish to speak in support of this application? Okay, seeing none. Those who are in opposition to this application may also have the opportunity to present to this council. Anyone wishing to take opportunity? If you just tell us your name and your address, sir.
Mike Stolke. I live at 5254 line 72. According to this, there's supposed to be a pond attached for the school. Where is this going?
Okay.
Like, we have small grandkids and we're wondering.
Okay, so I believe this is in reference to a proposed site sketch, which is a very premature step, I think, at this point.
Yeah,
and it includes
like,
a stormwater, is it a stormwater management pond? Is that correct? Mr. Gundrum, did you want to speak to this briefly? And now, this site plan, of course, is not a final, sir, but it gives you some idea. Page 81. I think there's a... There we go. Okay. Some way to magnify that. Thank you. Can someone point to this effectively? So this stormwater management pond is at this point, and again, this is a undetermined, not a fixed plan for the site, is showing being on the south part of the site, facing line 72, I believe, and so it's adjacent to the street, and sort of to the, as you can see, to the west end of the added proposed lands. Do we know anything about depth? I think the gentleman is asking questions pertaining to, what would be the implications for safety for young children, and depth of these things, and what precautions are commonly taken.
There'll be a fence around it, or?
That would be determined.
David, I think you should come up, just because we do record our meetings.
That's about all.
So to address the neighbors' concerns, the stormwater management pond, as was alluded to earlier, this is just a proposed location for the pond. The site-specific details would be determined through a future site plan agreement application. So details such as screening and fencing would be dealt with at that point in time. Those aren't matters that would be considered as part of the application that we're dealing with tonight, right. Which is in regard to relief from policy to permit the proposed uses from occurring at this location.
Okay, thank you. So there's sort of an orderly process, sir, that we go through, and this is the very early step of the process. Later on, should this move forward, a site plan with a lot more detail would have to be presented to this council for approval. Okay. Any further who wish to speak in opposition to this application? All right, seeing none for that, the applicant is now invited to share with us their comments pertaining to the application. Welcome again, Pierre Chauvin.
Welcome again. Twice in one night. Oops. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Again, Pierre Chauvin with MHBC Planning. I just want to thank county staff and municipal staff for all the help in moving this application forward. I'm here this evening with Darren Huber and Maynard Gingrich with the Donegal Community Christian School. Also with me is Julie Welch, who is with my office as well, who's assisted throughout this project. I'm just going to give a bit of background on the application and how we arrived in our opinion. I guess suffice it to say from the outset, with all respect to our friends at the county, we certainly disagree with their opinion. With respect to the subject lands, we've identified the existing church and school property on red within the Donegal settlement area. The existing property, including this church, is about just over 2 hectares in size, or 5 acres. We're proposing to add, by way of a severance and through this amendment application, approximately 2.6 or 6 acres of land as an addition to an existing institutional use. It's just immediately, I'll call it northeast of the intersection of Perth Road 147 and Perth Line 72. And existing uses on the site include the church. There's the church right there, a large parking lot, the existing school here, and some portables at the intersection of the two roads, and approximately about 15 kilometers from Listowel. From a contextual perspective, is obviously the site's located, or the existing school and church are within the established settlement area, which we've outlined in blue on this air photography, and the expansion is adjacent to the settlement area outlined in white on this image. Surrounding uses obviously include the single detached homes within the settlement area, agricultural lands pretty much on the remaining 3 sides. There is the Gerber's workwear facility just to the north of the settlement area, and there are some rural residential lots in the area as well. Just by way of background, the Donegal Community School was established in the early 1990s with 2 classrooms and programs for basically students from K to 8. It's grown substantially in that time and has undergone a couple expansions, most recently in 2015. And at that time, they've added the grades 9 and 10 with 2 additional portables. More recently, they have added grades 11 and 12, and they anticipate that demand for that high school age children will continue to grow, and they've reached their capacity. And they're looking for an expansion to allow for that future growth and increasing their school capacity to about 180 to 200 students. This is quite amazing in the context, as you know. In this day and age with government funding cuts, there are schools closing across our rural communities. The Christian school has certainly bucked that trend and is showing growth and looking to expand and keep a school within your rural community. The schools, as you know, play a vital component to our rural lifestyle, and this application is integral to keep this school in Donegal. There are other schools within the Christian school network. There are 3 other schools, one in just outside of Wallenstein and Hawksville, Arthur and Listowel, as you know, just north of Listowel. all of which are operating at or near capacity. We certainly have looked at other locations, and even in and around Donegal, including across the road. But all these options proved unfeasible and certainly would have also similar impact on agricultural land. The most feasible option was to expand as much as possible in situ, and in fact, the proposal was originally to have the school outside of the settlement area, but through discussions with staff and our clients, we decided to simply add the addition to the existing school and keep those most, I'll call it, incompatible uses with agricultural uses in the settlement area and allow some of those less intensive uses outside the settlement area. The intent of doing this, though, ultimately is will allow the church and the school to maximize their existing facility, the existing parking, the infrastructure that's put in place already. This certainly creates some efficiencies and also removes the school from what we feel is a very not generally very safe location at a very busy intersection of roads, and relocating the access to the school further away from this intersection. Just from a regional context perspective, we just plotted the students that are currently enrolled in the school and put on there a 15-kilometer, basically a 5-minute drive, which is a reasonable drive to the school. All students are driven to the school. And the majority of their students are within this 5-minute drive. There is an established catchment area that has been established for this particular school. It certainly overlaps with other schools, the new school in Listowel, and perhaps even the school and the countryside school in Hawksville. But families that go and attend into this particular school are used to and have established a long history of going to this particular school, and it is an established use that is certainly, as I noted earlier, needed for the vitality of this rural community. There was suggestion that perhaps we could move or utilize the north side school in Listowel, again, to relocate all the students to this particular school. First, there isn't room or capacity at this existing school, but the demographics, as you can see, of this particular school would necessitate further driving of all our students to Listowel. So what are we applying for? The lands are currently designated agricultural, as you've heard. We are looking to designate these lands as a special policy. We're not proposing to remove this agricultural designation. This is a very similar approach to what OPA 43, which was done for the school on the west side of Listowel, which was a special policy area to designate the lands to permit a school, but remain and keep the underlying agricultural designation in place. The intent is to utilize, as you saw in the conceptual site plan, these lands for the necessary recreational infrastructure that you would typically find at a school, i.e. playgrounds, baseball field, soccer field. There is some infrastructure, the stormwater management pond that is required, and we have tried to condense that area, the aerial extent of those uses on the expansion lands to minimize the impact on the agricultural land. So again, from a zoning perspective, similarly, we are talking about rezoning to a use, a special zone category to allow for these recreational or passive recreation use and the infrastructure, as well as to permit the minimum distance separation setbacks, a reduction to the MDS setbacks that I'll speak to right now. As you know, provincial policy requires that new land uses, including creation of new lots, comply with MDS. And MDS is intended to address nuisance issues related to odor generated from livestock facilities. And they're generally based on the maximum capacity of surrounding facilities. We have done various calculations. There is, I would say, a disagreement in terms of how this type of use would be categorized, in particular with respect to whether this particular use would be considered a type A and type B land use. Rather than get into the technical details of this, suffice it to say, on a type A land use, this is a less sensitive use, considered a less sensitive use, whereas a type B land use would be a more intensive type of use, a subdivision, 5 or more lots, etc. Those types of, and that's a fundamental issue, because how you define this type of use determines the extent of the setback. And so with a type A land use, you can imagine that something that's less intensive, the setback requirements are a lot less than something that is more intensive, such as a type B land use. The county and the province would suggest that this is a recreational use, and such that would be determined a type B land use. We would view this, given its very infrequent use during recess and even during sort of 8 months of the year, a very passive use, much akin to an open space use. And I would draw the definitions in the guidelines speak to the distinction between a definition of an open space use versus a recreational use relates to public visitation. And public visitation is the key difference. This is not a public facility. This is a private facility. Private individuals go to this facility for a specific use. It's being used very intermittently and in a very passive nature. So our view is this is definitely a type A land use, which has implications on the MDS, which I'll get into. If I can get it to move. There we go. So if we were to assume a type B land use, again, here we are in white. We've done setbacks from, there's an existing dairy operation, there's an existing hog operation, which is comprised of 2 barns, one here, one much further just underneath this black bar. Another, I believe it was a vacant barn here, but we did have to assume setbacks to that. Again, you can see all of Donegal is impacted. No matter which way we go, north, east, southwest, will be impacted or impacting the surrounding livestock operation, assuming this is a type B land use, something that is very intensive. Conversely, if we assume it's a type A land use, this is the impact or change in setbacks. No impact, no impact, no impact. Still impact from this hog operation. I should point out that the funny thing about MDS, how it's calculated, even though there's 2 separate barns and most of the capacity's down here, you measure from the closest barn. That's why we have to come here. Regardless if we moved our entire facility within the settlement area, it's entirely within the MDS arc. So regardless of where we would go, this activity is going to be within the MDS setback. What we are requesting is obviously an adjustment to that setback. And our view too is that if we were to do the reverse, an MDS2 calculation, we have demonstrated to county staff that there's very minimal impact on the ability of the existing livestock operations to expand by virtue of the existing non-farm uses that exist today. There are a number of rural settlement houses in this area. The settlement boundary itself also creates setbacks. Our addition of this particular use creates a very marginal impact on the ability of this barn, and particularly these barns, the 2 barns that are particularly impacted, from expanding their facilities. We talked about the conceptual site plan. Again, as the Mayor alluded to, this is still very conceptual. There are more steps to this process, but we have identified the stormwater management pond, the access further away from the intersection. This is line 72 at the bottom of the page. The existing school here. We have relocated the access with the addition in this location, addition to the existing church, with a soccer field, baseball field, and just general play area. As part of our mitigation, we have proposed mitigation to MDS. We propose a tree screen. Not only does the MDS guidelines, do they contemplate variances to setbacks, but they do, if variances are contemplated, albeit some of these measures may not be effective in mitigating odor, they do suggest things such as tree screens, which is what we are proposing. They help disperse the wind and the odor, etc. Through discussions with, you'll note this is a much bigger area. Through discussions with staff, they've asked us to consider tightening the boundaries of this, and so we did. And so we pulled the boundary back and tightened up the uses within the facility or the proposed policy area to minimize the amount of land taken out of agriculture. Our preference was for the larger area as it created a more consistent and irregular shaped parcel, but we're prepared to accept this particular configuration even though it creates this odd sliver of land. Again, our point at the end of the day though, this particular area with the school and this area here added is about 8.7 acres, which if you're familiar with the particular with school planning, school boards will generally plan for sizes, school sites about 5 to 7 acres in size, ideally even 10 acres, but 5 to 7 for elementary schools is something that's typically required, and this is generally in conformance with those size requirements. There is a subsequent application for severance. I guess I'm not going to go through this in great detail other than to say we believe we conform with all the tests in the county official plan with respect to lot creation. And in my submission, I would say that we believe that the proposed OPA and zoning bylaw amendment are consistent with the provincial policy. The school is to be constructed within the Donegal settlement area boundary, and all the more less intensive uses are proposed on the proposed expansion area. And this official plan and zoning bylaw conforms with the general intent of the county's official plan, and lands are not being removed from agriculture. This is simply adding these particular uses to the existing agricultural and zoning designation and zoning. We believe that this site, and we've prepared a servicing plan to demonstrate the site can be adequately serviced through private services, and this site can be compatible with the surrounding agricultural uses. And I'll close again on the fact that, in my mind, this is a good news story. We have a rural Christian school who's looking to expand in your community and continue to operate within this established settlement area. Despite all the current problems in rural schools in this province, like I said, the Donegal Christian School is bucking that trend. And with your support, we hope to see that this school, this vital institutional use in this community, will continue to operate. Those are my comments and submissions. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Pierre. County councillors, any questions on this one? Councillor Duncan? Deputy Mayor Kellam?
Just one comment through you. So back to the MDS calculations. I'm just wondering why property 5279 wasn't taken into consideration with the distance.
5279.
So it would be on the southwest corner. There's a barn there?
Oh, under another quirky thing about the calculations, if there are 4 more non-farm uses between the intervening land uses, you do not have to do the calculation for that particular barn, so that's why it was not done.
Okay, thank you.
That's it, guys? Okay. Can you just, with regards to the minimum distance setback, can you just sort of talk me through what that range is? I mean, there seems to be implied that there's a calculation that's used for the purposes of identifying whether you have a type A or a type B situation, and therefore the setbacks that are required. I'm trying to understand what those thresholds are, and it's not making sense to me yet, so I'm hoping you'll explain that.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. What do you mean by threshold?
So I assume that there is something in regulation that says that you must be so far from these operators, and that it applies to the type of property. That was sort of my understanding, but please give me insight onto this one, and
Sure.
I may call on David to do the same.
Well, I'll try to answer it. The guidelines for this type of application, the guidelines, again, these are guidelines, but these are enshrined through provincial policy, do require us to look at all livestock operations within a kilometer of an application. And so that's what we have done. And I've done numerous MDS calculations. I've appeared before the board on MDS, provided advice to municipalities on MDS. And in all my years, I probably have not seen calculations which would result in setbacks greater. Generally, on average, you get with an average operation setbacks for large operations of 5 at max, 5 to 600 meters. That's a large operation. The typical operation, you'll see something more in the order of 2 to 300 meter setbacks. Just to give you an idea of sort of, and it's largely dependent on the type of livestock you have. So it's a function of the type of livestock, the amount of livestock, and how you store your manure. And so all those factors will vary how much distance it is. And the last factor is the type of the land use that you're considering. So that comes back to the type A or type B land use. So the less sensitive type A land uses require something of a lesser setback, whereas a type B would result in something more significant like this. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
David, did you want to add anything to that, just for my edification? Come forward. No. You guys like each other, right?
I wouldn't disagree with anything that Pierre has stated. What I would say is that in addition to statements provided, that there are certain uses in the MDS document that fall under a type A classification, which has a 1.1 multiplier in the calculation. Should a land use fall and be classified as a type B, there's a large table and chart which divides different defined land uses as either type A or type B. That factor doubles to 2.2 in the calculation. So in this case, the applicants in their submission initially classified the proposed use as a type A as conservation lands, whereas which implies a more passive use. Part of what determines whether something is Class A or Class B relates partially to the frequency of the use or how often people will be present within that area. So conservation lands versus a recreational use. Recreational use would imply that there's more frequent use by humans versus conservation lands implies a much more infrequent use. So conservation type A versus recreation type B impacts double. It can either double or have that factor that goes into the calculation. So is what I would add.
So on the chart that's on the screen at the moment, just in terms of comment, I like these are larger circles. That's what I'm getting, is that there's intended more setback or
Doubling.
Double the setback. 2.2 is, I think, the number that David was talking about. But in these concentric circles, it seems regardless of whether we look at A or B, the current school lands still in those zones. This current school is being affected as currently located.
Exactly, and I don't want to belabor this type A and type B issue too much because you're right, you're absolutely correct. Whether we deal with it as a type A or type B, we're still in the same situation as we are today in varying the MDS. And my point still comes back to the fact that given the nature of this use, this will have a very marginal impact on the surrounding livestock operations. And that also considers the fact that there's a number of other non-farm uses in the area that already have an impact on these livestock operations and their ability to expand. There's no surprise, this that comes off the page, this livestock operation down here, why it had to get located this far, because of Donegal. It creates an impact on where a new livestock operation. So any new livestock operation already has to locate this far away. We're adding such a marginal change by virtue of adding these lands. It's such a marginal impact on this particular property to expand this facility. And if I may, I'll read you the definition of, and Mr. Gundrum referred to as conservation. It's not conservation. Type A land use includes, and it's defined as open space uses. These are environmental areas and parks that have limited public visitation. So I emphasize limited public visitation. And usually do not require buildings or alter the natural topography, such as conservation areas and parks, typically without buildings and infrastructure. Let's compare that now to recreational use, which is a type B land use. Uses that generate frequent or regular public visitation. So again, public visitation, and usually require buildings or infrastructure such as campgrounds, golf courses, sports fields, and trailer parks. I think there is a dramatic distinction in how our use is characterized versus how its recreational use is characterized in the MDS guidelines. But again, I don't want to belabor the point. Either way, we need a variance to MDS. So.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Doug.
It's just one last comment. So did you say earlier that a similar decision was made out west with a school, like west of Listowel?
That is correct.
A similar decision as
and with respect to special policy and how the official plan amendment was dealt with.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I have one more question, and I just want to be sure that I roll this out. One of the options, of course, for expanding student capacity at the site would be to increase the density of the school, building up, right? Has that been considered?
No, that hasn't been considered, but obviously there are costs going up. There's obviously economies of just simply a single story. But regardless if we go up, we still need space for our kids to play.
So just wanted to check.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Councillor Duncan, anything last on your mind?
I guess I'm still kind of looking at the MDS regulations. How, if we were to expand this school area, I'd like to see what the impact would be on the surrounding agricultural operations if they want to expand. How much farther back their properties are they going to have to move?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I did bring some graphics to illustrate that. So if I may, I can provide. I have one copy. Okay. But what you have is what we've done is the reverse. What you see today is MDS 1. The reverse when you're expanding a livestock operation is MDS 2. Effectively, though, you should end up with the same setbacks. And so what we have assumed is in the first image, you see it, but orange colors, that's with all these setbacks are with respect to this hog operation. We did another one with yellow circles relative to the dairy operation. And what we've identified is small hatched area, the net difference that our application has on the ability of this hog operation in this instance to expand. So the only difference by adding these lands is adding this small sort of triangular piece in terms of setback. So a barn can be located in this location. So similarly, you'll see it on the other image as well. So if I can.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Okay. Doug, do you have any other questions? Okay. Matt, do you have any supplementaries on this?
No, this was my concern here.
Okay. I think we're there. Do you mind if Councillor Duncan has a look at these? And we'll certainly make them available to the rest of council. Thank you. All right. So following this public meeting, North Perth Council will consider a recommendation concerning this official plan amendment, which will be sent to the Perth County Council. Perth County Council decision will be subject to appeal to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, or LPAT, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. That brings to close that public meeting. I think we should do the third one, and then perhaps we'll consider a short recess for council. So our third public meeting this evening, this is for all of North Perth Council. This is a public meeting pursuant to the Municipality of North Perth's policy regarding a proposed site plan. For those of you who've come for this meeting, welcome. The purpose of the public meeting is to consider site plans under Section 41 of the Planning Act RSO 1990. It is the responsibility of council to decide if the application is to be approved or denied. Those in attendance wishing to make comment concerning these applications will be given an opportunity to do so. Those who want to receive notice of the municipality's decision concerning this application are asked to sign the sheet at the back on that table, giving their mailing address and telephone number. At this time, I'll call on North Perth planner Sean Yilmaz to present a summary of this application. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Kasenberg, members of council. Site plan application SP 18-2019, submitted by property owner numbered company 2549825 Ontario Inc., applies to lands located at Lot 5 of Plan 175, part of Park Lot number 2 of Plan 159 in the Lestoul Ward, and is located on the east side of Albert Street. The property owner is proposing to construct 2 single-story apartment dwellings on the subject property. Each apartment will consist of 10 units for a total of 20 dwelling units on the site. The property has a total lot area of approximately 4,375 square meters or 47,000 square feet and a lot frontage of approximately 11.9 meters. The subject lands are currently vacant. The subject lands are within the residential designation of the Lestoul Ward official plan and is within the residential 5 zone of the North Perth zoning bylaw with site-specific provisions identified as R5-18. The residential designation and the R5-18 zone permits the proposed apartment dwellings and provides several site-specific provisions and regulations. This includes permission for deficient frontage and setbacks, as well as the requirement for dedicated visitor parking, enclosed garbage containment, and privacy screening between adjacent residential uses. All of these have been identified on the site plan. The municipality's chief building official, fire chief, public works, municipal engineer, and the North Perth planner have reviewed the site plan drawings. Adequate parking, access, fire protection, waste storage, lighting, and lot grading and drainage are provided for the development. It is staff's recommendation that council proceed with the adoption of the bylaw authorizing the mayor and the clerk to enter into a site plan agreement and have it registered on title. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you, Sean. I'll call on Clerk Bearfelds to provide us with notice of public meeting details.
Notice inviting persons to the public meeting were mailed on December 5th, 2019 by first-class mail to landowners within 60 meters of the subject property.
Thank you. And further, Clerk Bearfelds, can you summarize for us correspondence, comments, and reports received to date?
We've been in receipt of no correspondence.
Thank you. At this time, the opportunity is for those who are attending for this public meeting who wish to make comment on the application or details of the site plan to do so. Anyone wishing to take advantage of that opportunity? All right. If the applicant wishes to take the opportunity to offer comment on this site plan, the applicant may also do so. Is there any indication of same?
Hello, I'm Tyler Kerr, co-owner of 245-9825. I think Sean, he pretty much summed up what we're going for there. We're just trying to get our 2 10-plexes in. I don't know, you don't need to bring them back up. It's pretty straightforward. We have extra parking for 4 extra spaces on the side, and then there's a garbage spot in the back where, you know, they'll come in and pick it up. So I think he pretty much covered anything, and yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, do you have any comments or questions at this time? Anyone? Okay. So in terms of future actions, notice of this decision will be given in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The Council's decision is subject to appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal only by the property owner or applicant in accordance with the provisions of Section 41, subsection 12 of the Planning Act RSO 1990. And that brings to an end that public meeting. That brings us to an enabling motion to bring us back into regular council at this time. I have that for our consideration, councillors, as follows: that the public meetings for the purpose of Planning Act applications is now adjourned at 8:44 p.m. and the council reconvene into regular open council. Can I invite a mover for this? Deputy Mayor Callum, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this item? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And I suppose I should change the source so we can see what's going on. That would help. And that is carried. Thank you. So we are back in session, Council, and my first order of duty being back in session is to suggest a 10-minute recess. Let's reconvene at 5 to 9 o'clock. Welcome back, Council. For those of you who are watching remotely, we're back in session. Thank you. We are going to take up the business that we have related to the three public meetings we've had this evening. Let me begin with item 4.1. I have a very long resolution. I assume I should read it into the record for the sake of being formal. But I warn you that this is going to take a while. So, for our consideration, the following motion, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the report entitled Application for Draft Plan of Subdivision Number NP 1803 by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Delmich Holdings Limited, affecting property described as part of Lot 16, Concession 8, Lot 17, and part of Lots 4, 5, and 16, Plan 255, Elma Ward, Municipality of North Perth, Monument Road, Atwood, dated December 16, 2019, prepared by the County Planner for information. And that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth recommend to County Council that the application for draft plan of subdivision number NP 1803 by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Delmich Holdings Limited, affecting property described as part of Lot 16, Concession 8, Lot 17, and part of Lots 4, 5, and 16, Plan 255, Elma Ward, Municipality of North Perth, Monument Road, Atwood, as circulated by the county on November 26, 2019, be approved, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the subdivider enter into a subdivision agreement with the Municipality of North Perth and that the terms of the agreement be satisfactory to the Municipality of North Perth, including but not limited to A, provisions for phases, B, provisions for roads to a standard acceptable to the municipality, C, provisions for the allocation of municipal reserve capacity for water and sewer that is coordinated with the phases, D, provisions for the installation of and connection to municipal services, water, sanitary, and storm systems, E, provision of stormwater management and conveyance of facilities, F, provision of grading and drainage plans and related installations, G, provision of trees and landscaping on streets and any other public areas, H, provision of sidewalks on one side of all roads. Item 2, that a copy of the subdivision agreement shall be provided to the County of Perth Planning Department prior to final approval. Item 3, that this required subdivision agreement shall be registered against the land to which it applies once the plan of subdivision has been registered. Item 4, that an amendment to the zoning bylaw of the Municipality of North Perth be obtained to place the land in the appropriate zone classifications to implement the planned development. Item 5, that the subdivider satisfy any financial requirements of the Municipality of North Perth. Item 6, that the development meet the Municipality of North Perth's development standards. Item 7, that all aspects of the water supply, sewage disposal, electrical services, stormwater management be confirmed as acceptable to the Municipality of North Perth and the appropriate approval authorities. Item 8, that a parkland dedication arrangement be made in accordance with the Planning Act to the satisfaction of the Municipality of North Perth. Item 9, that the proposed new roads be constructed as public streets according to municipal standards to the satisfaction of the Municipality of North Perth, and that they be named to the satisfaction of the Municipality of North Perth. Item 10, that the road allowances shown on the draft plan shall be dedicated to the Municipality of North Perth. Item 11, that the subdivision be registered in 4 phases as per the phasing plan identified on the submitted draft plan. Item 12, that any road or stormwater management and drainage infrastructure required for the independent development of any phase shall be completed to the satisfaction of the Municipality of North Perth prior to the registration of the respective phase. Item 13, that any dead ends and or open sides of road allowances created by this plan of subdivision shall be terminated in 0.3 meter reserve to be conveyed to and held in trust by the Municipality of North Perth until required for future road allowances or the development of adjacent land. Item 14, that any easements required for municipal services will be provided by the subdivider to the satisfaction of the Municipality of North Perth. Item 15, that any easements as may be required for any utility purposes including but not limited to electricity, telecommunications, cable, and gas, shall be granted by the subdivider gratuitously to the appropriate authorities to their satisfaction. Item 16, that the subdivider shall enter into an agreement with Hydro One Networks, Inc. regarding electrical services and supply. Item 17, that any utility or communication provider to the subdivision be provided with any easements to their satisfaction. An agreement required by a utility or communication provider has been entered into by the subdivider to the satisfaction of the utility or communication provider. Item 18, that prior to final approval, the subdivider shall consult with Canada Post to determine suitable permanent locations for community mailboxes if necessary, and that the subdivision agreement include any clauses required by Canada Post. And item 19, that the subdivider satisfy any outstanding financial charges to the municipality of North Perth prior to final approval. Can I invite a mover for that? And Councillor Johnston, don't even think about asking me to read that again. Councillor Seiler is going to move that, and just from 7 on, thanks. And Councillor Richardson, thank you, as our seconder. All right, discussion, debate. Yes, let's go with Councillor Richardson first.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kaysenberg. It was made mention by Mr. Chauvin about the possibility of addressing the phasing issue, as in subsection 11 of the agreement. It was made saying strictly in 4 phases. I'm not sure exactly what the wording would be for that, or even in itself what was being proposed as far as phasing. Multiple phases, less phases, more, or I really don't, I just know that he had made mention of a possible slight amendment to that.
Right, and I think what I trapped a part of it. Danette, did you get any of this out of curiosity? We'll wait on the clerk's table to see if they have some verbiage here. Okay, so what I captured was something to this effect, that the subdivision be registered generally in accordance with the submitted plan, with flexibility, I'm sort of taking your words now, available, or flexibility or consideration available to the developer. Pierre, I hate to reach out into the audience, Mr. Chauvin. Did you have suggested wording for this that you wanted to make sure we consider? Okay. There's a consultation happening at the back of the room. All right.
I was hoping to discuss this with them following this meeting, but what I've written down was that the subdivision be registered in phases, generally in accordance with the approved draft plan of subdivision, period. Any changes to staging may be permitted subject to the satisfaction of the County of Perth and the Municipality of Perth. So you still have, it's still subject to your approval. And I should also add, there'll be a zoning amendment likely.
So I think the clerks would benefit if you read the second sentence of your statement again. I'm watching their faces. Go ahead.
Any changes to the staging may be permitted, subject to the satisfaction of the County of Perth and the Municipality of North Perth.
Okay, so that's a proposed amendment because we have a motion on the floor. Good with you? You're going to move that, Councillor Richardson?
Through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, I'm good with that amendment to the resolution as presented.
Okay, can I get a seconder for the amendment? Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you. So let's discuss the amendment first. Is there any discussion or debate on the amendment at this time? All right. Danette, are you sort of caught up with us on the amendment to item 11 or condition 11? All right. Then let me switch my source here. So if we can have that vote, can you trigger something for us? Okay. You're, okay, so it looks like Councillor Andreessen is in favor, but the technology is not picking it up, and we have Councillor Ernst, so that's carried. So now back to the core motion, which is this long resolution that I'm not reading again. Councillors, discussion or debate? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Kiesenberg. I appreciate the application and look forward to seeing it move forward for approval. The question I had of staff and the resolution that you see before you was passed by a previous council 3 years ago. And I note this because it was at the time of the North Perth Master Growth Plan, the midterm report, dated May of 2016, and there were 3 items that North Perth Council had adopted. First, the municipality of North Perth maintains a planned 5 dwelling per hectare net residential density for Atwood as a realistic and appropriate density target for residential development. 2, the municipality of North Perth closely monitor development activity and reconsider the appropriateness of the planned residential density for Atwood in 5 years. And lastly, number 3, the municipality of North Perth consider and encourage higher density developments in Atwood on a case-by-case basis. In discussions with staff, I understand that item 3 clearly is the preferred approach, certainly in dealing with this. The density targets that we're looking at range at least 3 times, if not 12 times greater than what the density, which is 5 dwelling units per hectare, which is actually less than the current density that Atwood had on private services. So going back to both what County Planner Gundrum as well as Planner Chauvin on behalf of MHBC is when North Perth extended services to Atwood, there was considerable time and effort as well as substantial monies invested to allow for that development to occur. And it is anticipated, as was outlined, that we are going to see densities such as we have under this proposal. So I'm certainly in support of that. And frankly, at a later point, I'd bring forward a motion for council to reconsider this motion at a later point. Certainly not now. But it's something which clearly flies in the face of what the county official plan policies are for densities as well as provincial policy statements. So just if I may, just one further question through to the Pierre Chauvin on behalf of the applicant. There was no discussion point in terms of in the application form what the affordability piece is in here. I mean, the expectation is when we're seeing townhouses and multiple dwelling units that we would anticipate that there would be unit prices which would be reflective of that. And in part, it's because the Affordable Housing Task Force is going to be presenting, and I sit on that. Clearly, we are anticipating and glad to see that there is a range of dwelling unit types. You can always encourage more, but seeing how we have this, I'm wondering if through you we could have the answer, because we weren't given that information unless I missed it, but I don't believe we were.
That's a reasonable request. Mr. Chauvin, would you like to comment on this if you have any information on this at this point in time?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I don't really have much more to add other than what Councillor Rothwell said, that obviously with the introduction of the townhouses and the multiple residential unit mix, they are intrinsically more affordable than single detached dwellings. I guess the only added comment I would make is that obviously Atwood is a different market than Listowel, and it will certainly command a different price point than what you would see in Listowel. So my expectation, I can't predict though, but my expectation that prices will be somewhat lower in Atwood because of its location. But again, I'm not holding my clients' hands to that, but I think, like I said, with the appropriate mix in housing, there will be some, this isn't affordable housing by all sense of the words, but it is more attainable.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering, just in terms of the table that's on the application form and the county's plan of subdivision, if there was information supplied in there that talked about the affordability piece at all? Because we never saw the application, that's all.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't recall what the application form said.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any further comments or questions about this amended resolution? Councillor Rothwell?
Just further, I just want to pick up on one of the points that was addressed by one of the letters from the applicant, or one of the neighbors, regarding the access along the or proposed walkway that goes out to Main Street. There is the expectation that the walkway which is proposed is adjacent to the proposed multiple unit block, but I believe is separate. And I think I'm not certain as to whether or not through site plan approval we're going to have the ability to deal with the issue of the proposed or requested fencing along the south and north side of the 3-meter wide walkway. I'm just wondering if staff had that conversation, because my understanding through the applicant's agent, Pierre Chauvin, is that the municipality and the county had requested the walkway, and if there was any conversation in terms of the municipality or the developer having fencing along that walkway to protect the privacy of the property owners to the south.
I'm going to ask a planner, perhaps, to comment on this. Do we have anything on this at this point?
Yes, so we did discuss the walkway, and it was requested from staff, as we do want to maintain that connectivity. We did not dial in too much into the site plan details. However, it would be noted that there would likely be some sort of privacy structure between the the multi-unit development and any single detached use. But we could dial in further at the zoning amendment stage to include any necessary screening.
And it seems like it's a reasonable request down the road. I think what I'm hearing is that this needs to unfold a little bit further before we get into those details.
Yes, we do have the application for zoning bylaw amendment, but we haven't processed it to the full extent as we were waiting for this plan subdivision.
Just further, it may end up being the municipality's responsibility if it's our walkway, unless we have the developer build the fence prior to conveyance through the municipality. And my understanding, I certainly appreciate Planner Yomaz's comments in terms of the multiple unit development, but that's on the north side of the walkway, and I understand from the property owner, the neighbor, that they're more concerned about the walkway itself as opposed to the multiple unit residential in terms of privacy and fencing. So that gets to the south side of the walkway and their private enjoyment of their property, as opposed to having people walk along and perhaps trespass onto their property, I think is what their concerns were.
Sure. I think I'll invite Mr. Chauvin. He looks like he may have something to say about this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rothwell is correct. That, as far as I understand, that is your standard. Maybe Lyndon can correct me if I'm wrong, but your standard for walkways does include fencing, and that will be part of our servicing of the subdivision. And prior to conveyance of that block to the municipality, there will be a design prepared, securities posted, and that design would include fencing, I would presume, for the walkway, and that'll be conveyed to the municipality as part of the registration.
Great. Thanks very much. I think that will certainly address their concerns as well as ours.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further discussion or debate? Seeing no indication of that, let me switch the source here, and let's have that vote. And that is carried. That is carried. Thank you. All right, let's turn to our next item of business here. So item 4.2, we have a decision to make here, Council. We have two choose your own adventure night here. We have a denied option and we have an approved option for this particular item on our agenda. I would entertain suggestions about which motion you'd like on the floor first. Councillor Barons?
I have a few concerns with this application, so I'm not sure that I want to deny it, but I certainly would need a little bit more information or clarification on a few of the items.
So would it be in order to move a deferral awaiting further information, and then we gather as council the information that's requested, or invite that from the provider of such?
I'm not so sure that they would be able to give me the information.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure exactly how to proceed. The county's recommendation is a straightforward one. It's perhaps the place we start. The county has recommended, of course, that the application be denied. I could read that resolution into the record if you like and see where it goes. Or if you prefer, we can have a sort of a relaxed discussion before we pick up any resolution, and that way we have the opportunity to ask questions and talk about this. All right, so I'm sort of seeing some heads nodding that they would appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Why don't we just hold off on the resolutions? With council's permission, still maintain reasonable parliamentary order, but let's proceed to invite your comments and questions at this point in time. Councillor Barnes, would you like to start?
Okay, my main concern, or I have two main concerns. First off is the site plan itself and the configuration. 8.7 acres. Unless I have misread this entire application, the 8.7 acres is the additional land for recreation purposes only, because the new school is going on to the church. 8.7 acres is an awful lot of land, and if they were to reconfigure it differently than what they have, I personally believe they can get away with half as much. The way, I mean, they're making the soccer field the long way, and I mean, we can have that discussion, but I don't believe that they need 8.7 acres. The other issue is just the concept itself, that they currently have 90 students, my understanding, from kindergarten to grade 10. They now have added 11 and 12. At what point in time do they expect to be at the 180 to 200 students? Because it was suggested they're not there yet. And historically, I would have liked to see, and this is why I'm not sure of the information that they can give me, I would have liked to see their projected growth in the school to see. And if they're simply coming from other areas because the other areas are over capacity, that's not necessarily, this isn't necessarily the best solution for that.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Rothwell?
Just for clarification, I believe, just Councillor Burns, on page 53 of the report, or of the council agenda, I should say, first page of the report, page 53 of our agenda, the approximate area is 2.63 hectares or 6.5 acres. So that's in addition to the land area that is already utilized for the church school parking area, like all three. So that's on page 53 of the report. Just so we have our numbers, but it's 6.5 is the additional land area. I'm not saying that's totally recreation, but that's what I read in the report, just for clarification. No, I can understand there's lots of numbers.
Okay, further discussion or debate? Discussion mostly.
Good. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'm concerned about this application for a number of reasons. The provincial policy statement is clear in terms of the policies that are considered to be important in the province, and the municipalities, we are to uphold those policies. Now, there are distinctions when we talk about educational facilities. The most recently, in the provincial policy statement, there was a separate provision that was established to allow for institutional uses such as schools, churches, and cemeteries for those that rely on horse-drawn transportation as their primary means. in the agriculture designation. So we have seen some of those applications move forward. These are small scale, and clearly they are to deal with those that are sort of geography bound in some respects in terms of their transportation choice. This, in fact, is not the case here. We live in this neighborhood. I know the group which is involved here. It's a very active and busy church and school, and it's great to see it's a growing concern. The concern, though, I have is in terms of how we implement the minimum distance separation, and generally speaking, the way it's dealt with is that schools are schools that save and accept if it's a school, church, or cemetery that's required for horse-drawn transportation, because that is a one-times factor on the MDS. It's specifically in the MDS document. It's treated separately and distinct, so we don't have to go in and sort of reinterpret that. Here in this case, this facility, church and school, is no different than Elma Township Public School and so on in terms of how it's dealt with in terms of an MDS perspective, and it's a two times factor, and it is considered to be a facility. This is a private school. Elma Township is a public school. Nevertheless, it's a facility which is used 8 months of the year, and it's used more than that in terms of Elma Township Public School for their soccer fields and so on, but this could very well as well by their group. I'm not necessarily convinced that we should turn our backs on what our county planner is saying, but secondly, in terms of directly from OMAFRA, their specific comments. This is not just an off-the-shelf sort of conversation. This is a roll up your sleeves and talk about it. And I understand why the applicant's agent has taken an approach such as this, but when you see in their own documentation it says an active open space, I believe is the wording. I don't want to misinterpret it, but active is actually in the documentation as opposed to the specific words of passive recreation. And again, passive recreation from a planner speak is maybe there's a walking trail, maybe it's not a golf course, it's not a ball diamond, it's not a soccer field. It's something which is used very infrequently by few people. The projections, as Councillor Behrens has pointed out, are upwards of 200 students at this school. It's relatively small now, but it could very well grow, and certainly they hope it does. So I'm concerned about that. And not to go on too far, but I am really concerned in terms of the significant livestock operations that are in proximity to this. They are both to the east, and by my recollection, it's 220 meters further to the east than what it is currently. The current boundary of Donegal on that east side does require a two times factor, as was mentioned by both planners. There's no getting around that. There's no interpretation of that. That's what is required. And that is exactly the reason why those facilities were built the way far back as the way they were. And hogs, as though the number of hogs is relatively small versus the dairy operation for the east, those are both significant operations. And frankly, I would not want to see anything stand in the way of allowing for these operations to expand, and as well as the farm immediately to the east. There could be some livestock facility on that farm lot immediately to the east at some point. There was previously, but allowing for this may very well drive that any livestock facility further to the north, and perhaps never see livestock facility there. So I'm concerned on those basis, and I understand the plight of the church, and perhaps there could be some reconfiguration that makes this much closer in than it currently is, but I really am concerned about that. Thank you.
Further comments from councillors? Councillor Johnston.
I'm also very concerned about the MDS issue, and we have a letter in front of us from OMAF's rural planner that says, in his opinion, is type B, and that doubles the two factor in for the MDS, and that's very concerning to me as for all those livestock operations in the area. So I agree with Councillor Rothwell that, that if it truly is a type B, and we have it here that OMAF considers it to be type B, and so by using that 2.2 factor, that really limits those dairy and swine operations just to the east. So that's very concerning to me.
Thank you. Further comments? I find myself also sort of wondering about this application. It's a most curious one. It has its advantages and its disadvantages from my perspective. I think one of the things that interests me here, though, is if the owner of the lands, the Mr. and Mrs. Gerber, elected to build a baseball diamond or a soccer field in their farm lot, could they do that? And if in fact they could do that and choose to turn around and lease it or rent it to the adjacent school, would there be the same range of considerations in all of this? It's one of the things that I've been pondering. I don't know if we have any answers, but it's just something, sort of a stray and perhaps an outlier thought, but it strikes me that there may be a way that this could be achieved, even against council's objection, through use of other approaches to this. So I'm sort of curious to see how that might play out as well. That's some strange Todd talk, perhaps. Anyone else got comments to make? Councillor Rothwell?
Well, further to your musing about, sort of building a field of dreams sort of scenario, if I suspect you're right in terms, like no building permit is really going to be required to build your own baseball diamond or soccer field for your own specific purpose. It's just a matter that when it becomes more of a public use, that's when it creates an issue. And certainly, if anything ever would happen there, I mean, I'm sure that's outside of our realm of concern in terms of from a fiscal responsibility and so on. But there are specific issues I think we, from a municipality standpoint, have to look at in terms of whether or not the recreational use of a farm property is, whether it complies with the zoning or not, and if there was ever someone had some objection, which they submitted a letter of concern through to our bylaw enforcement officer, they'd have to look at that as to whether or not, they had given permission, Gerbers had given permission to the school to operate on such. I think that would certainly raise a few eyebrows as to whether or not, if we can do that, then what else can we do? And I would be shocked, frankly, if that would be allowed to fly under the radar, because there'd be plenty of other people doing that as well. And there may be, but I don't think that there's that many that are doing it, because care and, ownership equals care and control and responsibility. So.
Any other further thoughts here? Okay. So now let's choose our own adventure. I think perhaps we start the county resolution, what the county has proposed to us, and we decide whether this is a go or not. So I'm going to introduce this resolution. This is the one, as I said, in the county's report. It reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth recommend to the Council of the County of Perth that the application for amendment to the County of Perth official plan, County OPA number 183, submitted by MHBC Planning Limited, Pierre Chauvin, MCIP, RRP, on behalf of Donegal Mennonite Fellowship Church for property described as part of Lot 31, Concession 9, Elma Ward, 7057 Perth Road 147, be denied, as it is inconsistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2014, as per sections 2.3.1, 2.3.3.1, and 2.3.6.1b. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Andreessen, and seconded by Councillor Behrens. All right. Any further discussion about this specific resolution, which is to accept the county planner's recommendation on this? Seeing none, let's have the vote. Let me switch the source here so that everyone can see what's going on. So that is carried, which means that our recommendation to the County Council will be to deny this application. Okay, let me turn to the next part of the book. All right, item 4.3 pertains to the site plan application that we heard earlier this evening. And here's the resolution that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve site plan application SP 18-2019 submitted by 245 9825 Ontario Inc. affecting property described as Lot 5, Plan 175, Part Park Lot 2, Plan 159, 596 Albert Avenue North. List to award, and that council proceed with the adoption of the bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter into a site plan agreement and have it registered on title of the subject property. Can I invite a mover for that one? Councillor Duncan, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Anstead. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that matter? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. And then we have the bylaw for this, councillors. That bylaw number 145-2019 being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a site plan agreement with 245-9825 Ontario Inc. be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Kellum, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on the bylaw? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Council, we have two delegations this evening, and our first is item 4.4. I call on Kourash Mavash, a member of the Mayor's Task Force on Affordable Housing, to present the final report of the task force to this council. It looks like Russell Dambrook is approaching. Okay.
Well, no. Oh, yeah.
And I'm Santa Claus.
I am taking the reins on this one tonight, Mayor Kaysenberg. Yes. Mayor Kaysenberg, council, staff, I'm reporting tonight on behalf of the Mayor's Task Force for Affordable Housing. Committee members are all listed on the first slide here. And by the way, this is my first PowerPoint, so I have a wingman here that's running the button who he says is ticklish. Anyway, we're a little bit late in getting back to you. I know this isn't the 26th of September like it was supposed to be, but we've had a few challenges in terms of helping meetings. We've had our problems getting those done, but we've gotten to where I think we've got a really good report for you. You look at the methodology. Okay, good start. Census data, obviously, and the statistics that we got from that, the academic papers that have been supplied to us through Sean and through Kourash. Government documents, the CMHC documents is what we relied on a lot. And we've spoken with realtors and in town here and employers. And we have other online resources as well. I have my papers here. There's different ways of approaching the affordability question. One of the things, sorry, I've got 2 pages here. This Mike and I aren't going to get along real well. There, how's that? I think we're good now. It's got a better balance point. Maybe just go from that up there. The how, what, and why of affordability. We started out with one premise, which was that there was a moral obligation, basically, from the municipality and the community to have affordable housing. And whether that just included rental or ownership, or in some cases the very basic word shelter probably applies. There's different methods of assessing affordability. CMHC's method basically is to use 30% of household income. That's their limit for what you can afford. The residual income is basically the idea of you can afford what you've got left. That idea is pretty basic as well. So, and there's also the affordability index, which includes housing and transportation. That's considered to be roughly 45% of what a person's income is. One of the interesting concepts that I hadn't really heard about, and it's addressed in this next slide of why affordability, overhousing. That term was one I hadn't really heard much of, but it's one of the facts that we're faced with in Listowel here, or in North Perth. The number of houses that have one or two people in them that could accommodate an awful lot more lend themselves to some opportunities that we saw in our work. And if you look here, 876 residents were 1.7 residents per house that was built, or residence that was built in Perth and or North Perth. And you can see from this the next one here. And this is pretty recent, and it's from the realtors. 16 homes for sale is all that was listed in Listowel here. This as of Friday the 13th. 464,000, 5,000 was the median. So if you work the figures through, you would need an income of $109,000 to be able to afford the median of these houses in North Perth here. When we look at the median incomes, that's not going to cut it. You're going to have more affordable housing, or housing at a cheaper rate than that. One of the eye openers I think we got on this next slide was the fact that, and we got this in two forms. One, the study from Perth County and St. Mary's here that indicated this graph. But the realtors that we talked to were quite adamant that we were at a satisfactory level when it came to the seniors, that we've got that area covered. Pardon me, but the big one becomes this 18 to 35 group. That's 58% of the requirements basically for the housing. And I think what that means, or at least where you tie that back into, if we're looking at retaining our youth, retaining the younger people that we're trying to keep from departing, as one of the other task forces got to, or creating opportunities for young people looking for jobs here, addressing this area seems to be one of the more important aspects of what we can do. The how of affordability, basically it comes down to, I guess, adopting the definitions, which was spoken about earlier here in one of the contexts that was identified. And identifying and prioritizing the target populations. So we've kind of covered off some of that, I believe. And identifying and prioritizing targeted housing types, whether that be townhouses, multi-use, whatever. And identifying and prioritizing the targeted tenure, whether that's, again, ownership, rental, or co-op, et cetera. And then developing the strategies. And we've tried to look at short, medium, and long-range strategies in this paper. Intermediate and short-term recommendations, commissioning a study on housing affordability in the municipality, focusing on the demand for every type of housing as identified in CMHC's housing continuum. Immediate and short-term recommendations also included initiating an awareness campaign, both online and in print, to promote the municipality's already existing initiatives. And that is the secondary units, development charge reductions and exemptions, etc. Explicit focus on housing affordability in the municipality's policy development and council deliberations, and appointing a current staff member and or staff counselor as affordability coordinator or advocate. Again, the intermediate or more of the intermediate and short-term recommendations are facilitating the formation of a permanent community-led housing affordability advocacy group and proactively engage, encourage, and collaborate with local nonprofits, faith organizations, and volunteer groups. Encouraging and exploring joint initiatives with local employers and businesses to meet their employees' housing needs, whether that be co-housing with willing local residents or newly built facilities. Medium and long-term recommendations include densification, encouraging and facilitating infill development within the existing fabric. For example, through allowing up to 3 accessory uses or units in a single property, similar to the policy that was just adopted in Kitchener. Allowing detached accessory units and facilitating property severance by easing or exempting some of the existing conditions. The medium and long-term recommendations, providing additional incentives similar to recent changes in development charges for high-density, affordable housing development and for all tenure and rental housing types. Facilitating and encouraging the rezoning of properties owned by faith-based and nonprofit organizations for the development of social and affordable housing. And encouraging renovation and adaptive reuse for residential purposes of the currently vacant above-ground spaces in business properties in downtown Listville. Continuing on, we've got the medium and long-term recommendations, including exploring the long-term lease or other arrangements to develop municipally owned land for affordable housing, particularly for alternative methods of tenure, i.e. maybe a cooperative. And engaging with all levels of government, county, provincial, and federal, to secure funding through grants and other no-cost or low-cost financing options for the development of affordable housing in the municipality. So then we have basically the money sheets or the summary sheets, which there's about 15 or 16 points here that we believe are important. The first one is a fairly straightforward one, and it's talking about collaboration, the word synthesized findings by all the mayor's task forces, getting together to evaluate just how much synergy there is amongst the four, whether the mental health would be better served if you've got more housing options, if jobs are served better if you've got more housing, if more young people stay if we've got more housing. So tying those forces together, even though meetings are going to be tough to coordinate, I'm sure, but tying those together I think is a very important first step. Adopting a definition of affordability and identifying the target pool of population, that's and household type, as well as housing and tenure type, whether that's rental or owned. And commissioning a study of housing affordability in the municipality. Starting an awareness campaign about existing initiatives and emphasizing affordability in municipal policies and deliberations. Adopting a municipal affordability coordinator, which is staff or council member, and initiating a community-led advocacy group for affordable housing. Obviously, collaboration with local businesses and employers to provide affordable housing for their employees is another big factor. Densification within the existing built-up areas through increasing the allowable number and configuration of accessory uses and additional municipal incentives for high-density develop. Examples would be limited time property tax exemption for high-density developments. Relaxing zoning and or accelerating rezoning application process for development of properties owned by nonprofits and for affordable housing. Exploring residential occupancy of the above ground spaces in downtown commercial buildings using municipally owned land for development of affordable housing and actively seeking county, provincial, and federal level funding. I think it's pretty obvious that there's obviously no magic bullet that's going to do any of this, and we're certainly not alone as a municipality here. It's not only province-wide, it's countrywide. So we've offered, I believe, a bit of a blueprint. I hope it meets with your cooperation, and if you have any questions or suggestions, I am open to those questions. One thing I would like to say, this report was produced basically by Kurash Mahavish with help from the rest of us or comments. He's done a heck of a job putting this together. I'm just the delivery boy. So thank you, Kurash. So I want to recognize that. Any questions?
Councillors, questions or comments on this report? Councillor Anstead.
Well, thanks very much. Through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, and Russ, thanks again for your presentation and to your team. Obviously, like you said, this is a problem that's ongoing not only in the province but also across the country. When looking at your recommendations, I'm just wondering, in May, I guess the bill was introduced, Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choices Act. I'm just wondering, was there anything that stood out in that you could maybe, that we can use to kind of move this forward?
Without having it in front of me, Neil, I'm going to kind of defer to anybody else that can answer this. Alan, have you got something?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the big issue that we talked about is that the number one target that we've talked about is encouraging, supporting existing property owners to establish at least one dwelling unit, and whether it's a single room that they're available to accommodate someone, or whether it's a additional dwelling unit, either within their dwelling or in proximity to. Those are critical issues that can happen now, and small work by individuals is going to, I think, team up to utilize our existing infrastructure, as well as being able to house people within months as opposed to within years in a planned subdivision sense. There's, as our team has talked about, there are short-term issues and there's long-term issues, and it's the long ones that we have to start at, but don't expect to bear fruit. But this critical issue that we've talked about is the other information that the province has come out with just in the last 3 weeks was the whole issue of how to create a secondary suite, and we're hoping that the municipality of North Perth can sort of put together a guidebook, which we've provided samples of, so that when property owners do come into the building permit, for example, or talk to our planner and other staff, here's the step-by-step process, and the fire department's involved, the building departments, and finance is involved in terms of here's the checklist of things that needs to happen, and you might need to talk to your lawyer about certain things. So that's where I think we're putting a lot of our efforts is sort of some quick gains, because we need to have them, because these are critical issues here, and that's more on the rental side. There's no doubt about that, as opposed to an ownership piece.
Is Neil, do supplemental? Okay. Councillor Andreessen.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Todd. Thank you, Russ. Good presentation, and appreciate you spending your time and being involved. Really appreciate it.
It's been a long 4 or 5 months, but they've made it fun. We've had some good meetings. So.
I have a question about the information around seniors. You said that in North Perth, it was felt that seniors were well supported through affordable housing. Is that based on the availability and types of housing through like um, what we have currently, or is that just based on income because their incomes are perhaps higher that they could support a home, like home ownership? Just curious what kind of led to that kind of understanding.
We've actually got it two ways. I don't know if Sean can go back to that slide with that 18 to 35 group where it stood out as being a really big one. This study that Perth County did is showing, 4% for 56 years older and older. We got basically the same anecdotal evidence from Bruce Kempston and Barb that they felt that the seniors that have a few dollars in their pocket can certainly find places, and there's enough spaces for community living as well. They did address something that we haven't addressed here, which was assisted living that we maybe have to be looking at as well, and maybe didn't address in this one maybe like we should have. But they're pretty much consistent with this study that Perth did here, showing that the seniors are well covered off right now at this point. Given that there's going to be more seniors, that might change, but I think currently we're looking at a pretty healthy, when you look at Sugar Bush and the other options out here and some in Atwood that self-promoting that are out there, that maybe there's opportunities for the seniors certainly. So.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? I think there was a lot of, go ahead.
One other thing, just for council's information. So what we had talked about at length was, and with some of the other task forces, the fact that we have this domino effect happening, and I think there's been just not more than just anecdotal evidence, but also certainly from the real estate folks, because they can give us the specifics, is that when people sell their houses in larger markets at higher prices and so on, and they choose to sort of get away from it all and get their piece of small town life, whatever that is, it pushes out or takes it out of reach of certain people within our current communities. So we have had evidence knowing that people that perhaps grew up in North Perth here have to go further afield themselves, even though they may work here close by, is that they can't afford to live here anymore because people are paying the asking price and above for something that otherwise is unattainable. So that's been an issue for us that we have talked about, and that's the reason why when we look at the county study here, it's that's dated. That's more than just the recent 2 years. That certainly the domino effect that we call it has impacted us. But I think we all know of people that have been in that circumstance, that they would like to be able to live here, but they just can't find it based on the few houses that are available in terms of from the either brand new or resale market. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Andreessen?
Through you, Mayor Kiesenberg, I want to pick up on what you just said, Alan, because I look at that stat as of Friday, 16 homes for sale. It begs the question of why is that? Is it that we don't have enough available housing in our municipality for newcomers? I just find that fascinating that, wow, it's just incredible that there isn't a lot of availability. So I find it worrisome.
Yeah, indeed. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. That has a lot to do with the market that we have in town right now. Like as soon as a house comes up, it sells. Like some of them have been selling like, and I know from experience that there's been houses that have come up at a very attractive price point and they haven't been on the market for a day. There was one home that came up, and I do believe it was, don't quote me, doesn't matter where it was within the municipality or within Listowel. for $249, and I do believe it went for $265 within 24 hours. Like they have lists like a lot of these when they come on the market, but if you look at the median price, what was the actual breakdown? I think 10 of those homes of the 16 were over 400?
Well,
Or
yeah,
over the...
a month or so ago when we had Mr. Kempston in here, he was talking about 15 homes and 10 of them over 500,000. Obviously, there's been some listings since then to change the number because Koresh has this as being current. But at that point, like 10 of the 15 were over 500. Now, anybody can say that every house in Listowel is affordable to somebody. I mean, everybody has their own price point, but we're not looking at servicing that market that's 600,000, 700,000 or 500 above. We're looking at the more basic needs and meeting the needs of the general population, not the few. So it's creating more of the affordable type for the people with the median incomes in here that have been pointed out as being representative of what we've got. So
I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much. I think it's really important to let you know how pleased I am with the report that you've provided and the challenges that you've faced to get to that report point is acknowledged. We appreciate what you've done. Thank you, and thank your task force members. We'll have a resolution to dissolve your task force at this point. But I will point out, this is not just a local issue. There was a conference held recently in Toronto where they called it the missing middle in the housing market. And that appears to be a problem not just for big city Toronto, but a problem for North Perth based on some of the information that we've seen. So there is work to be done. I think, as we've done with the other task forces, I want to assure members of the task force that we will take your itemized list and factor it into our thinking and planning as we move forward. I think you've raised an important suggestion, and it's something that I'll discuss with the Deputy Mayor and with staff, and that is now we've got all 4 task forces reported, it might be very useful to put all those recommendations side by side and find yet another group to sort of push them forward in a coherent and integrated kind of way.
just so you know, this isn't my task force. This was done alphabetically.
I know.
I'm just up to, I'm the oldest too. That's the other honor they gave me. So anyway, thank you all.
Thank you very much. So Council, I have a resolution for our attention to express our appropriate appreciation here. It reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the report from the Mayor's Task Force on Affordable Housing in North Perth and express our appreciation for the work they've undertaken. Given it was a time-limited task force, that means that its duties will wrap up on our moving of this motion. So can I invite a mover for this? Councillor Johnston, thank you, and Councillor Behrens as a seconder. Any further discussion or debate on this one? Let's have that vote. Terry, are you locked out? Terry, you're in favor, though? Okay, so we're please mark Councillor Seiler in favor, and that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 4.5. We have a second delegation this evening. I have the names of Irene Scott or Carol Newton. So whichever is present, or both, who wish to provide this council with their feedback on plans to replace the abandoned Nickel Branch 6 municipal drain. Welcome.
Mayor and Council, my name is Irene Scott, and I wish to discuss the proposed storm drain that is to replace the abandoned Nickel Branch 6 municipal drain located in the Sugarbush development. At a May 24th meeting with 11 affected neighborhood property owners in the spring, it was announced they wished to abandon Branch 6 and replace it with a new storm drain. We were given a map of its approximate location close to the rear of our properties. The new storm drain would hook up all those that were previously attached to Branch 6. Some neighbors who bought after 1988 do not know if they are hooked in or not, but we were told they would find all hookups as they went along, and we could be attached to the new storm drain. My neighbor Carol Newton and myself are hooked into Branch 6 due to badly flooded basements in the 80s. They now tell Carol and I they wish to offer us a sump pump instead because staff and engineers working on the drain think this is best. I have communicated with an experienced plumber who works for a company that builds a couple of hundred houses annually. He does not recommend this solution. They would have to punch out my basement floor to hook up the drains around my house. If the drains around the house are lower than the sump pump hole, it will not work. And I already have a sump pump, but they say theirs will be better. Sump pumps have a history of failure, and power outages are a big problem. Battery-operated pumps are also not guaranteed. If it all were to work, I would be pumping the water on my yard on my weeping bed, and my septic tank would be in danger, which would put my well in danger. The street curb ends before my house, and we get a little extra water in our yard from that. But since 1988, the hookup to Branch 6 has solved all our basement flooding. Carol Newton also has had no issues since hooking up to Branch 6 in the 80s. We've had a few meetings this year and phone calls and emails with Rod and Lyndon and Matt Ash and Scott Richardson. On July 3rd, the council minutes state that only 2 residential properties are currently connected to Nickel Drain Branch 6 and will be connected into the proposed storm drain system. All costs will be the responsibility of Sugarbush Developments. The new storm drain was to hook to another nickel drain to the west of us. Recently, they were discussing hooking Carol and I to a neighbor's catch basin, but we feel the catch basin may well be at a higher elevation and our water cannot run uphill. And maybe the catch basin would not support the volume of water. Last week it was suggested on the phone that if I hooked some kind of drain, I should sign a release absolving the town if my basement floods. Carol and I would like to hook to the storm drain as proposed in the spring that would hook to the proper nickel drain.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Councillors, do you have any questions for Ms. Scott at this point? Okay. I'm going to direct perhaps to Mr. Couch. And also, I may need a status of council's decision-making on this drain. The clerk may be able to help me with that, but let's start with Mr. Couch.
Thank you, Mayor Kiesenberg, members of council. I agree with very much of what Mrs. Scott is talking about, and it has outlined well in terms of this process. Really, the abandonment meeting did happen. We did indeed say that a connection should be made, and the developer has been fully cooperative through this entire process in terms of finding options to provide well-designed, proper drainage for any properties that were connected. At the time of the meeting of the abandonment, we knew 2 properties were connected. We did not know how. As it turns out now, in subsequent meetings that have been mentioned, we know that it is those weepers around the basement or floor of the homes that are connected at a very low grade. Once we knew this, we did talk to the engineers, to the experts. Matt Ash, in fact, was asked to go to one of 2 meetings at the homes of the 2 ladies that were impacted to talk about what the best engineered solution is. And really, this is that debate as to what is the best engineered solution versus what has worked so well for so many years, as Irene Scott and Carol Newton have described. However, this is rural tile. It's at a relatively flat grade. It has never backed into the basements since it's been put in place. We did video it a couple years ago and found it's in bad condition. We also know that we're in the storm levy zone, which means that it's a municipal responsibility. However, through the development, the developer's taking care of putting it in place. But because of that, it's a line that needs to be built to municipal engineering standards. We asked the municipal drainage engineer to comment, and he did so in the home and said direct connection to the weepers and the floor drains is not recommended by design standards because storm systems surcharge and are expected to surcharge. It's not a case of when it's going to surcharge, but that it will surcharge at some point. So we asked the municipal engineer, BM Ross, same comments, same response. So that's the dilemma we're in terms of this situation. Now, the report that I provided to council earlier on this really gave some options, and that was to try and reduce our liability. So indeed, I did have the conversation with Mrs. Scott about signing a waiver in terms of any kind of surcharging into her home if we were to install direct connections to floor drains. And she said she wasn't interested in that. We fully understand that, but it was a question that had to be asked and an answer that had to be given. I concluded my report by saying, and I didn't realize that you had done this, that a licensed plumber could come in as a third-party opinion to look at the actual technical ability to put in a sump pump, which is the recommendation from the engineers, that would totally disconnect her from the system and offload into the backyards and see if that, in fact, would solve the drainage problems in the house and maintain good drainage. Thought an independent plumber might come in, and that's really where I left this for council's consideration, just to update you as to where we are. Very much in agreement with what Mrs. Scott has said, but that a conclusion has to come to this in the next couple months because the builder, the developer, needs to put the last line of homes over the old branch drain. It's urban development. We have to put a municipal sewer in to municipal standards with municipal connections, or we put in sump pumps. And just by way of information, if it was a new home, if we knocked one of these homes down and put a new home in place, the building code requires a sump pump installation and disconnection, and that there would be no connection to any kind of storm sewer from floor drains. So, but as it sits today, they are connected, and so they have a realistic question and asking to stay connected. So I'm going to just leave that with council, and I'm going to offer that we're going to continue to pursue maybe the legal option of a waiver, which has been responded to, but also potentially looking at backflow protection and separated lines. As it turns out, and we're not certain, we think there's shared lines. We haven't dug it up, but the homeowners have told us it's a shared line that leads out between the houses and crosses the property lines. Even more of a problem because we don't know how the connections work at all. So that is not something we typically want to connect to because, again, where would the problem be created and whose basement may flood and what was the cause of it? It's hard to trace in those situations.
Okay, councillors, questions or comments? Councillor Behrens?
Lyndon, can you remind me, did we, as the municipality, connect them to the nickel drain?
Yeah, the work in the 80s was done as a municipal drain project with perforated tile. Our current drainage engineer talked to the existing drainage engineer, whose name was Garth Nectar, and he explained that it was basically a system that was put in place to lower the water table to allow better septic bed drainage. And there's a line in here that says it wasn't for direct connection to homes, but there's another line in that old drainage report that says if connection happens, we believe that's connection to localized weepers and drainage in yards, not to floor drains. So the report originally and the design of that pipe originally was not for those kinds of direct connections according to the interpretation of the current municipal drainage engineer and the other one. Municipal project, these connections were unknown at the time and not recommended.
Did we, as the municipality, connect them?
We put in the large 8-inch pipe along the backyards in the adjacent property. I do not know how the connections were made. We know that laterals were put in place, and those are lines that were put off this main drain pipe, heading towards the yards in random intervals. Again, Garth Necker said those were for the purposes of draining the subsoils for opening up the septic systems to drain better.
Further questions or comments? I'm well past my technical expertise here. Councillor Johnston?
Lyndon, could the backflow valve be located not at the house, but more closer to the drain, to the connection to the new drain? Or does it need to be located at the house?
Typically, it's better at the house simply because it's easier to maintain and warmer.
Second question, if I could. Is there room for a sub pump as far as area? Like Mrs. Scott said about that she would be dumping water on top of her weepers. Is there, without knowing the property, is there a spot where it could be?
And again, we could ask, a third-party plumber about that. The drainage engineer looked at the rear yards, and that was part of his recommendations as to why he said sump pump. He felt that there was good drainage and good fall in the yards to take the water on the surface away.
I like the idea of an independent plumber coming in and looking at the situation as well and seeing if the sub pump is doable or if it's going to cause a lot of issues as well.
I think, to me, I would think that given this sort of concern around this, that the municipality may wish to take on that cost of that independent assessment.
Certainly. We did offer earlier for that to happen. In the midst, Mrs. Scott wanted to come to council and talk, and certainly that's happened tonight. This is an opportunity to discuss it and then to move forward and possibly do that and bring something back.
Councillor Richardson.
Through your Mayor Kasenberg, I agree as well. Even though Mrs. Scott has sought the advice of a current plumber, and certainly consultation could happen with that plumber, but also having our own third party look at it, I think would be highly appropriate at our expense, just given the situation, and then provide the recommendations that come back with that. Maybe it's in conjunction with I'm not a plumber, so I'm not even going to speculate, but I think it would be certainly best to get that information, but I would certainly that would need to be on our dime to get this situation sorted properly.
Thanks. Anyone further? Councillor Duncan?
Having some experience in the last couple of years with some basement connected drains in Atwood and the surcharging from our municipal drains, flooding some basements, I'd be very hesitant to say that we as a municipality should be connecting any basement drains to a municipal drain system, even with backflow preventers. I think the sump pump system is the best way, and if we had to put a lateral in for them to feed their sump pump into with a gravity system to get that water to that drain, I think that would be a far better option than the direct connection to the basement.
It brings up a good point. The developer has been responsible for a solution and has agreed to that. In the original first paragraphs of this explain that a drain pipe could be put in or sump pumps. This would be both, and then costs would have to be looked at, and cost sharing would be the review of that. But that certainly does separate the drainage from gravity and serve the purpose of making sure we don't have that backflow.
Councillor Rothwell?
Just to clarify, my understanding is that it's the developer's responsibility for all this, as opposed to our responsibility. Is that right? I read just under the financial implications now, we talk about the options, no cost to either the homeowner or the municipality, and that's on the basis of the sump pump or the drain. But as the third issue is bringing in the third-party plumber, would that be our municipal responsibility, or is that the developer's responsibility?
We could talk to the developer about that costing. That wouldn't be significant. It would be information that we'd like as well. The real bulk of the cost here is the either or on the drain, which is agreed to, or the sump pump systems being installed in the homes, which has been agreed to as well.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Anyone further? All I can say is I do not, whatever solution is advanced and that is settled on, I do not want Ms. Scott or her neighbor to experience basement flooding that they haven't had for the last 30 years or whatever it's been, right? So we need to be sure that our solution is waterproof.
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you. Because Mr. Couch presented council with a report pertaining to this matter, we do have one resolution related to that. It's that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth received the update from staff entitled Highway 86 Residential Drainage near Sugarbush Developments dated December 16th, 2019. Can anybody move for that? Councillor Duncan, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Let's swap sources here and let's have that vote. Okay, so add Councillor Ansted's vote to this. That is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 5.1. There's no report from the CAO this evening, so that brings us to item 5.2.1, and you can see Pat is before us, North Perth Clerk, to provide us with background on matters and next steps associated with a proposed property agreement with Kilberg Properties, Inc. and Joe Courtney. Welcome, Pat.
As stated in the report that's been prepared by Danette, at the time of the application for consent and the recommendation that North Perth sent to County Council Land Division, one of the recommendations was that the applicant would hook up to municipal services when they become available. That was added through North Perth Council as a suggestion by North Perth staff. Going forth, it's been identified in order for the applicant to satisfy the conditions. They were not able to do that, so we did proceed with the letter of undertaking, and as you can see by the report, that has not been satisfactory. So tonight before you is an agreement that's stating the ability then to move forward with connecting to the sewers, and it's here for Council's consideration. We consider it our best effort and best opportunity at this time. It has been reviewed by legal, and I believe that they're willing to accept it as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any questions on this one? Comments? Okay, so we have two matters here. First, the resolution and the bylaw. The first is the resolution that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth received the report entitled Agreement to Connect to Municipal Services, Condition of Consent Application, dated December 16th, 2019, and further that Council proceed with the bylaw authorizing the Mayor and Clerk to sign the agreement to connect to municipal services with Kilberg Properties, Inc. and Joe Courtney. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Rothwell, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Anstett. Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And now the bylaw, that bylaw number 146-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Seiler, and seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that one? Let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you. That brings us through item 5.3. There are no reports indicated from our interim manager of recreation, which means that we're at item 5.4.1. Please take note that Councillors Behrens and Deputy Mayor Kellum have left the room. Are there any questions about our report on accounts this evening? Seeing none, I have a motion for consideration that the following summary of accounts be received by Council for information. The total is $4,163,045.94. Can I invite a mover? Councillor Rothwell, and seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. Yes, that is carried. Thank you. We can invite our colleagues in. So for item 5.4.2, I invite Treasurer Hale to brief Council on proposed administration fee changes for 2020. Welcome, Fran.
Thank you. Mayor.
You need to, there we
There you go. Yeah.
Green is good.
At this time, we're doing a review of administration fees, and this was last done in 2015.
As per the survey that was completed for budget, it was noted by the public that they were asking us to look more at fees relative to tax increases, so we took a good look. Nicole Noble prepared this for us in consultation with both finance and the clerk's department. She looked at about 18 different municipalities and proposing this increase at this time. It takes a while for the public and our lawyers and to get used to a fee, so we don't like to do it every year, but we do like to keep it current. So tonight we have these changes for council consideration.
Thank you, Treasurer Hale. Councillors, any questions on this matter of Treasurer Hale? All right, I have a resolution for our consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the various administration fee changes as presented to be effective January 1st, 2020. Can I invite a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Callum, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Behrens. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you, Treasurer Hill. Brings us past item 5.5, where we have no report from our Manager of Environmental Services, to item 5.6. For item 5.6.1, we have a report from staff pertaining to the award of tender for the Transportation Master Plan. So we'll welcome Lyndon Couch, our Manager of Operations, to provide us with an overview to that report. Lyndon.
Thank you. This was proposed to the capital process program this year, capital budget items, transportation master plan. And in general, it's looking for consulting services related to various traffic issues that we're facing. So what staff had done is put a request for proposals together with basically every kind of complaint that the public had with regards to traffic policy, but also the concerns that we've had over the last few years with traffic bypass issues, transportation, pedestrian movements, and also what policies we have surrounding all of those issues. Put it in a document and said, let's review all of that and make recommendations and also make policy recommendations on how we deal with these things in the future. So all of those items that we've been talking about with speed and traffic calming are nested in the transportation RFP. Two companies bid. Paradigm was the lower they came out higher in the RFP evaluation, and they're the recommendation in front of us today to move forward in a process that's probably going to take a year. It's modeled after the EA process. There will be at least 2 public consultations. There'll be a stakeholder group that's going to be designated. It's going to look at things in great detail in terms of transportation and planning and parking. So the recommendation in front of you is to go with the approved committee recommended group, and that's Paradigm. I would say that Paradigm is also working with a company called GSP Group. GSP Group is going to be the lead. We've had experience with Paradigm in the past. It really actually won't be the Paradigm staff that are going to be taking the lead. We'll be working with another firm. We did several reference checks. They did Saugeen Shores. We modeled our study after Saugeen Shores, and they did a very good job there. So we're looking forward to the potential of working with them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Couch. Questions at this point or comments? Councillor Andreessen?
Through you, Mayor Kiesenberg, I just had a question, just for clarification. It says identify trucking corridors. Would that be like bypasses for trucks to take in different areas of the municipality?
Yep.
Okay.
Indeed. We've had several discussions, and there's been previous studies about trucking bypass routes, alternative routing. This will review that and put some finality to that, I would hope, and also nest that hopefully even in the official plan in terms of future planning, 30-year build-out window, where we want those corridors to be and what we can plan towards, because it's not going to all be built in a year. It's going to be a long-term document, hopefully, that stays in front of us.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? I have a resolution for our consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth award the Transportation Master Plan RFP 3000-13-2019 to Paradigm Transportation Solutions Limited. I invite a mover for that. Councillor Johnston, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Seiler. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that's carried. Thanks, Lyndon, for that. There are no reports tonight indicated from the fire department. Brings us to item 6 on our agenda. For item 6.1, councillors, are there any reports you would like to ask of staff? Seeing nothing, we have received no items of correspondence beyond that already shared for council's disposition, which brings us to item 8 on our agenda. This item allows council to consider and enact bylaws. Turning to item 8.1, council is asked to enact a bylaw to authorize the signing of a lease agreement with supervised access visitation and exchange here on Perth. Does the clerk want to speak to this at all?
Just as a quick explanation, the municipality of North Perth has had an agreement with supervised access for several years. We were providing this opportunity for them when we were on Main Street, and it's just a renewal of the agreement.
Thank you. Any questions for the clerk on this matter? I have a draft of a bylaw for our consideration that reads as follows. That bylaw number 125-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a lease agreement with supervised access visitation and exchange here on Perth, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Rothwell, thank you. And my seconder is going to be Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that one? Let's have that vote. That's carried. Thank you. For item 8.2, council is asked to enact a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement with the Humane Society of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Stratford Perth for the purposes of canine control. Clerk Bearfelds.
I think simply this is a follow-up from our the council decision made last meeting in regards to moving forth with the Humane Society. Tonight the agreement's before you for council consideration. Hopefully we can proceed with this. I've had many conversations during the past week with the Humane Society on how we proceed. And as you can see after your presentation tonight, we need to move forward.
Thank you. Questions for Clerk Bearfelds on this? All right, I have a bylaw resolution for our consideration, that bylaw number 143-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement with the Humane Society of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Stratford Perth, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Seiler, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on that one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. Oh, Councillor Andreessen?
Something quick, just around communication. Just we've heard some residents kind of speak, indirectly about this, making sure that people are aware that we have something in place and what they could do to access those services in the event that they need it. I just heard residents mention it.
So just recently this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I received an email from the communications person from the Humane Society stating exactly how I need to change the website and prepare our social media accounts, and hopefully with the newspaper ads. So those communications will go out to the community hopefully by lunch tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, so I have a bylaw draft for our consideration, that bylaw number 144-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a lease extension agreement with the Kinsman Club. Oh, I'm reading the wrong one. Wrong one. I'm ahead of myself. We'll get there. Yes, here we go. That bylaw number 143-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement with the Humane Society of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Stratford Perth, be introduced, read, and considered read. Have we done this? We've done it. You can tell it's getting late. We need to vote. Let's have the vote.
It's getting late.
Ay, ay, ay. That's carried. Apparently I need my slippers. All right, next item up is item 8.3. This one is related to the signing of an agreement with the Listowel Kinsmen for a lease extension on terms identical to those in place today for the Kin Station. Do you have any comments here?
Only that the agreement with the Kin Station does end the end of this year, 2019, in negotiations, and not speaking for the mayor and the CAO, but there has been conversations, and the final agreement has not been agreed upon. So this is just going to allow a lease extension until such time that those agreements can come to some sort of finalization.
Indeed, and I can report that we have met with representatives, Deputy Mayor and I met with representatives of the Kinsman Club. I think things are moving along. Okay, so I have a draft now. Now I can read this one. Bylaw number 144-2019 being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a lease extension agreement with the Kinsman Club of Listowel be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Andreessen, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Rothwell. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 9. Are there any notices of motion from councillors attending this evening? I have one, so I'm going to turn the chair over to the Deputy Mayor very briefly. So please be advised that I intend to introduce the following business at the next regular meeting of Council to be held on January 6, 2020. Resolved that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth establish a standing Agriculture and Agri-Technology Advisory Committee without time limits on its operations. And further, that this Agriculture and Agri-Technology Advisory Committee be constituted and mandated in accordance with the draft terms of reference, which will follow at that meeting. And further, that this committee will be afforded clerking service, logistics, meeting, and recording secretarial support by the Municipality of North Perth. And further, that any councillor appointed to this committee receive compensation for services in accordance with the municipality's policy. And further, that this committee will report at least annually and at its discretion more frequently in supporting the work of council and promoting and supporting the evolution of the agriculture and agri-technology sectors in North Perth. Okay. That brings us to item 10 on our agenda. For item 10.1, are there any announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time? Yay, Christmas is coming. Yay. Exactly. So we extend to our community on behalf of council our greetings and best wishes for a wonderful Christmas and holiday season. Anything else for announcements? Seeing no indication of saying, that brings us to agenda item 11. I have a note in my book that we have a proposed closed session. I should look at the time before we go into closed session to determine whether we need a time extension. Do you feel that there is a need at this point in time to cover ourselves with regards to time extension for this meeting, Pat? Okay, so council, before we deal with the motion to enable closed session, let's have a resolution to extend the time of this meeting to no later than midnight. Okay. Okay. To extend the meeting. Yeah, me too. Me too, exactly. So to extend the meeting past 11 o'clock as needed, as needed, right? Okay, can I invite mover for this? Councillor Rothwell's looking like he's not too sure about that one. He's glad it doesn't say midnight. Seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Any discussion or debate? Can you do something with this one? Thank you. Oh, we need to see that. Okay, so that's carried. Now that brings us to our resolution for closed session that reads as follows: that this committee proceed in camera at 10:37 p.m. to address a matter pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition sale of land for municipal or local board purpose regarding property described as Park Lots 3, 5, A and B, Plan 290, North Perth. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Duncan, thank you, and seconded by somebody over here. Councillor Johnston, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have a vote on that. And Councillor Richardson is in favor, so that's carried. All right, that moves us into the zone where we'll have a closed session. Those who do not need to be in the council chambers may exit. We will turn off the microphones at this point in time. And as soon as we have things cleared up, we'll close the doors.